If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 21, Chapter 20, Running Down the Hill. Dojima truly wanted to give Tsuna a perfect score, but he would rather save it for later once he savored Tsuna's specialty, whatever it might be. I'm looking forward to tasting that, and I hope it will be better than your yakitori. Once he confirmed it was better, then Dojima would gladly give Tsuna the perfect score he deserved. Tsuna just shrugged his shoulders in response to those words as he turned to both Alice and Ryo, who were both clenching their fists tightly. They thought it was about who was better among them, but they couldn't have been more wrong. Tsuna then surveyed the whole classroom, which was looking at him with a mix of expressions, as he slowly opened his mouth. That's about it. I won with a 98? I was expecting a 100, but I guess I have a lot of room to improve. The room fell into silence. Tsuna appeared more casual than expected, as if he had done nothing impressive. This realization made them feel foolish for underestimating someone who could effortlessly dominate them. They still harbored grudges over Tsuna's decision to initiate a ranking competition on the first day of the training camp, threatening expulsion for those who ranked below a certain level. However, for whoever gets expelled today, just try harder somewhere else. But well, I made a lot of yakitori, feel free to take one of each. Those words only intensified their frustration. Yet Tsuna seemed unfazed, gesturing toward his countertop where the aroma of grilled meat wafted, tantalizing their taste buds. He then smirked as he continued, "This is going to be the best yakitori you'll ever taste, so don't rush it. And if you want to try the best fried rice ever, please come to my restaurant. It'll be open every day from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. Tsuna's eyes gleamed, revealing his other intention behind escalating the whole situation: a credible promotion backed by his overwhelming victory. Fried rice, huh? Is that his specialty? If so, then I should probably pay a visit to his place sometime. Dojima looked on with interest while Alice felt slightly speechless at the shameless promotion she once again witnessed. Despite his questionable character, this guy is certainly a competent cook. However, she was now seeing Tsuna in a different light. Alice now considered Tsuna to be on the same level as Irina, and she silently muttered, "Just wait and see, Tsunayoshi Ito. I'm going to catch up." After the 2 hours were up, Dojima then expelled 10 students who ranked at the bottom, just as he had said before. He was a man of his word, after all. Although those students felt frustrated, they now fully accepted their fate since they had tasted Tsuna's yakitori and were utterly convinced of the vast disparity in skill levels between them. And with that, they boarded the bus to return to the main hotel, which was about 40 minutes away from the resort. Similarly, the students from other classes also seemed to be boarding their buses. She might not have decided yet, but why do I feel like I'm losing? Takumi Aldini, a blonde student sitting in the aisle seat, frowned as he glanced at Soma. He had issued a challenge to Soma, which Soma accepted, and their instructor, Hinako Inui, had yet to determine the winner. And he's just one of the transfer students I have to defeat to prove them wrong. Takumi silently thought as he clenched his fist. However, he noticed Soma looking out the window in shock, mouth wide open. Similarly, his brother, Isami, was doing the same, and Takumi realized that everyone was also staring out the window in shock. What are they looking at? As he turned his head, Takumi's eyes widened in shock. What the heck? Tsuna. Soma couldn't help but call out Tsuna's name as he watched Tsuna running right alongside their bus, which was traveling at a decent speed but certainly too fast for a person to casually keep up with. However, Tsuna seemed unfazed as he effortlessly caught up and then left the bus behind, leaving Takumi completely speechless. Should I just focus on Yukihira? That guy probably isn't even a human being. He couldn't help but reconsider, as that Tsuna guy seemed a psychopath. As Tsuna kept running down the hill, finally arriving at the main hotel after 20 minutes, he glanced at his drenched uniform with satisfaction. As expected, this place is perfect for me to train. Being at a higher elevation on a hill in a mountainous region, the lower oxygen in the air helped him push his body further, a challenge he couldn't replicate in lower altitudes where oxygen was more abundant. As he walked in, Hitachi Sekimori, who was in charge of their next assignment to cook for bodybuilders, was surprised to see him. The student over there. Sekimori raised his eyebrows, recognizing Tsuna as the same student who had impressed Chef Chappelle. He greeted Tsuna with a smile and asked, "Where are the rest of your classmates?" Oh. Tsuna looked around, noticing the empty surroundings beside some of Totsuki's staff and a group of bodybuilders, then shook his head, I guess I left them behind. You left them behind? How did you even get here without them? I ran. Hey? But that's like 30 kilometers from here. Sekimori stared at Tsuna's drenched figure, somewhat shocked. This student didn't seem to be lying. He almost scratched his head as he spoke, well, anyway, you're going to need to wait for the rest of your classmates since we have another assignment here today. Oh, I see. Then I'll make myself comfortable. Thank you for letting me know. Tsuna's eyes lit up as he saw the bodybuilders. He walked up to them, borrowing their dumbbells to train while waiting for the others. He's quite a unique individual, I see. Sekimori observed how Tsuna effortlessly integrated into their group, surprising them with the strength hidden within his lean frame, and quickly became friends. After a while, the rest of the students finally arrived. Sekimori then surprised them with another assignment, to cook 50 servings of beef steak for the hungry bodybuilders within an hour, which made them feel like giving up, especially after their exhausting journey to gather ingredients. Nevertheless, they had no other choice but to press on. 30 minutes into the assignment, as the students were struggling to feed the bodybuilders, Sekimori loudly announced, Tsunayoshi Ito completed 50 servings. You pass. Hey? Already? How did he manage to finish them in just half an hour? The students grumbled loudly as the announcement pushed them to cook faster. Meanwhile, Sekimori observed Tsuna's departing figure with a pensive expression. He befriended them earlier, so naturally, the bodybuilders looked to him for the food. And his ability to cook multiple servings simultaneously is not to be underestimated either. He analyzed the situation, noting that Tsuna was the first to complete the assignment. With a nod of satisfaction, he remarked, Totsuki's future looks promising indeed. However, sigh. What was the name of his restaurant again? Ito's Golden Fried Rice? I'll definitely have to visit sometime. Yet, if his steak tasted that good, his fried rice must be exceptional too. Tsuna seemed to be promoting his restaurant as usual, a fact that Sekimori had overlooked. Still, the bodybuilders appeared disappointed as they realized Tsuna had left. Chapter 22, Chapter 21, Unexpected Mission. Arena Nikiri completed 50 servings. You pass. Humph. Arena proudly raised her chin as she slowly walked away. Yet, her eyes furrowed a little, remembering that Tsuna had finished faster, which left her slightly dissatisfied as she muttered, You're just a little faster. That doesn't mean anything. Afterward, she made her way to her room and waited for a while before growing bored. Fortunately, Hisako arrived and bowed, My apologies for making you wait, Arina-sama. No, that's fine. Arina waved her hand as her eyes then lit up, Hisako, did you bring a deck of Uno cards? She clearly remembered the novels she had read before, where students would bring cards to play games together and bond during school trips. As someone who held the title God's Tongue, she had never even had the time to play such games. That's why she was very interested in trying it this time, since they were at a training camp, which was pretty much similar to a school trip where no one was bothering her to try or sample anything for them. Unfortunately. Uno? No, I don't have any. Then, what about a deck of cards? Like the normal ones? Well, I didn't bring those either. Ah. That's unfortunate. Hisako gave a wry smile seeing Arina's deflated expression, which made her feel bad. However, she seemed to then realize something as she put her finger on her cheeks in a thoughtful manner, how about I ask the front desk if they have any? Oh. You're right. Then, make sure you do so. Arina's deflated expression turned into one seemingly full of expectation as Hisako went out to get the cards while she headed to the hotel's private onsen to take a relaxing bath. As she walked through the corridor while humming her favorite song, Arina's expression was full of the joy of someone looking forward to playing card games with her friends. Ouch! However, when she took a turn toward the private onsen, her figure suddenly crashed into someone, and a strong hand held her from falling. Her expression turned angry as she rolled her eyes and snapped, You! Watch where you're going! However, midway through her sentence, her eyes were immediately distracted by the sight in front of her. She could see a Greek god-like upper body, its muscles glistening under the sweat, appearing strong and sensual. Her whole face turned red from embarrassment as she looked at the person who held her and shouted angrily, Tsunayoshi Ito! Don't you have any shame? Why are you naked? Why are you always shouting? It was Tsuna. The others seemed to be a bit too slow in finishing their assignment, and he still had a lot of time to train. He had just finished another run outside, which was why he was sweating. When he decided it was time to clean himself, that's when he met Irina on his way to the private onsen. Sigh. Is that how you thank someone who prevents you from falling on your butt? Tsuna was speechless as he helped Irina regain her footing, then shook his head. Besides, I'm not naked. I'm just shirtless. That's the same. No, it's not. Yes, it is. Then, let me show you the real meaning of being naked. Tsuna's expression turned mischievous as his eyes narrowed, and he seemed about to take off his pants. She covered her face with her hands while still taking a little peek, shouting, "Fine, it's not the same. Stop it. You mean it?" This made Irina's head seem to emit imaginary smoke as her face flushed thoroughly red, extending to her neck. "Ha ha ha, I'm just kidding. Why you bastard?" Tsuna laughed, but Irina crossed her arms over her chest, looking away in annoyance while pouting. "Humph. It's not funny at all," she grumbled, making Tsuna shake his head as he grabbed his shirt from the floor and draped it over his shoulder. He then waved his hand as he continued to head toward the private onsen. He spoke, "Whatever then, see you later. I gotta clean myself." "Humph, of course you should. You smell disgusting. And I would rather not see you again." Irina cursed out loud as she furrowed her eyebrows at Tsuna's departing figure, who just chuckled in response. This annoyed her, and she couldn't help but mutter, "You pervert." However, her face flushed once again as Tsuna's upper body seemed to keep surfacing in her mind. Meanwhile, as Tsuna entered the private onsen for males, he saw a tall, bulky figure standing naked. He could see the defined muscles that spoke of hard work as he nodded in respect. "Oh? Ito-kun, you're done with your assignment?" "Yeah, it was pretty easy, Dojima-senpai." "Ha ha ha, it certainly would be easy for you." Dojima laughed heartily as he submerged himself into the onsen. Then, he turned to Tsuna's body while raising his eyebrows in mild surprise. "Oh? Do you play any sports besides cooking, Ito-kun?" Dojima was surprised to see someone with such an athletic body at Totsuki Academy, considering most students focused solely on cooking. Usually, just being fit was enough for them. He had begun working out to enhance his strength for the demanding job and simply loved being healthy. Technically, given that he was in a sports club now, Tsuna could be considered an athlete, especially since he was preparing for a tournament as well. However, he didn't see himself as one. He was a retired assassin with some proficiency in martial arts. Still, he genuinely considered himself a cook as he smiled, "I'm not, but I do know a little martial arts. And a bit of earth-bending," Tsuna thought to himself as he began cleaning his body. The medium-level earth-bending he had absorbed a while back was proven to be useful, allowing him to shape the earth to his will. Although it required more stamina, it was a valuable addition to his skill set, allowing his creativity in its use. This was why he had been training himself wholeheartedly to slowly build enough stamina to freely utilize his bending. Besides, his connection with the earth had been getting stronger lately after absorbing it, enabling him to even perceive things in certain areas around him with closed eyes. "Martial artist." Dojima blinked in amazement, then laughed, "Ha ha ha, as expected, there's nothing ordinary about you. I'm glad to have you in this academy. Our future looks promising with your addition." After finishing cleaning himself, Tsuna submerged himself on the other side of the onsen as both of them engaged in conversation. Mostly, Dojima talked about how Totsuki's restaurant was faring, almost as if trying to entice Tsuna to join them after graduation. However, Dojima gradually realized Tsuna didn't seem interested, which disappointed him. Well, I guess it's to be expected. Someone like him must want to see the world. He silently thought to himself. Tsuna suddenly stood up with a surprised expression, causing Dojima to look at him strangely. "What's up, Ito-kun?" "Dojima-senpai, I'm going to leave first. Just remembered I have something to do." To Dojima's surprise, Tsuna quickly bid his farewell. "This soon? Well, if you truly have to go then sure." Dojima shrugged as he adjusted his sitting position to enjoy the onsen better while Tsuna headed back to his room. On his way, he encountered Soma, but he was in a rush. Tsuna hurried to his room and looked at the screen in front of him, blinking in amazement. Interesting. Mission: challenge an alumni to a food wars and emerge victorious. Reward: advanced level of earthbending. Description: gain advanced proficiency in earthbending from the avatar universe seamlessly, regardless of different origins. Just as I had gotten used to the medium level, you showed up. Hey? Perfect timing. His eyes gleamed with excitement. Chapter 23, Chapter 22, Food War. Good morning. Shinomiya greeted the students, who all looked intimidated, knowing he had expelled many students the previous day. Sweat trickled down their foreheads as they nervously awaited Shinomiya's next words. They gulped mouthfuls of saliva, truly terrified of facing any assignment from Shinomiya. Amidst all of this, Megumi Tadakuro also nervously glanced at Shinomiya, feeling her body trembling. However, seeing Soma standing beside her, Megumi swallowed her nervousness and tightly gripped her fist in determination. I want to be with them until the end. I will work harder and become better. Her eyes shone as she looked at Shinomiya. You should already have the recipe for today. It's quite simple, so you won't need to team up for this. Shinomiya continued explaining with his annoying smile, the one everyone wanted to punch, as he added, you can use the vegetables at the back. And I'll give you one piece of advice. You'd better consider everyone around you an enemy. His expression turned serious as he narrowed his eyes. This made everyone feel even more nervous as they looked around warily. Shinomiya smirked slightly as he observed their reactions. All right, you'll have 3 hours. You can start now. Hey. Shit. I gotta be quick. Get out of the way. Damn, my cabbage. Every single student immediately rushed back toward the vegetable table to grab what they needed. No. Megumi was pushed back by the crowd, but she was persistent, trying to navigate around them to gather the ingredients she needed. She looked at her basket with a satisfied nod as sweat trickled down her forehead. There was one last ingredient she needed, and her eyes brightened. Then, I only need the cauliflower. It should be around here. She was about to reach the table where the cauliflower was located when she felt her heart sink. Her pupils shook as she realized the state of the cauliflower left, causing her previously brightened expression to crumble. Every single one of these looks discolored. That meant the quality was lower, as they had begun to oxidize, which wasn't ideal for cooking. No. I might just be overthinking. Megumi gulped, trying to convince herself as she began to check each one individually. However, after checking twice, she realized there wasn't a single good cauliflower left. This realization hit her hard, causing her to slump to the floor in disbelief. Memories flashed before her eyes, nearly bringing her to tears. Oh? Are you looking for a cauliflower? A voice interrupted her reverie, and she snapped back to reality, turning her head to see someone she knew from Soma's group, Ito-kun. I happened to pick up two. Tsuna smiled as he placed one of the cauliflowers back on the table. Oh. Megumi felt tears welling up in her eyes, feeling as if she had just received a blessing. She timidly wiped her tears away and was about to bow in thanks but was stopped by Tsuna. No need to thank me, you just picked it up from the table, right? Yes. Seeing her adorable reaction, he chuckled and suddenly asked, Megumi, are you up for adoption? Pardon? Wait, no, that's creepy. Tsuna rubbed his chin, realizing his comment was definitely out of line. Megumi blinked her eyes in confusion while tilting her head cutely. She's definitely cute, which means... His eyes gleamed as he offered her a smile. Then, why don't you introduce me to your mother? Why? Why? Tsuna's expression turned stony as he shamelessly spoke, because she must be a mother I'd like to fry rice for. Or... M.I.L.F for short. No. This made Megumi suddenly flustered, unsure how to respond. Haha, I was just joking. Tsuna just laughed at her. No, he was not. He then suddenly patted her head and she blushed shyly. Well, it's about time we cook. HN. Megumi nodded as Tsuna left for his countertop. He could feel a piercing gaze directed at him, and his expression slowly morphed into a calculative one as he turned to see Shinomiya clicking his tongue at him. He just flashed the guy a smirk. Why? You mad? He didn't help her since he was just putting down what he didn't need, which left Shinomiya unable to find fault in that. Arrogant prick. Shinomiya fixed his glasses as he silently cursed. Tsuna had been thinking about his mission for a while, and getting into this class made him think of an idea. Looking at the vegetables in his basket, which were in perfect condition. Tsuna just looked at them disgustingly. That guy must be a psychopath. Who in the world would dedicate a special vegetable cuisine? Vegetables tasted sad, and Tsuna hated it. Still, he wouldn't cook them half-heartedly, which was why. I'll do it my way. Tsuna's eyes gleamed with cunning. You failed. Next one. Shinomiya spat in disgust at the unpleasant 9 terrine vegetables in front of him as the student fell to the floor with a pale expression. However, he was merciless as he moved to the next dish, which was Megami's. He looked at her briefly before tasting it and then spoke, pass. Next one. Ah, thank God. Megami exclaimed, relieved, as Soma gave her a thumbs up. Here, please have a taste. You're the last one, hey. Tsuna placed his 9 terrine vegetables in front of Shinomiya, and the atmosphere suddenly turned cold. Megami seemed to have felt it, looking at Tsuna nervously, while Soma observed the scene with interest. He silently thought, Tsuna should easily pass this, right? However, you failed. Hey! What? Ito-kun. Both of them widened their eyes in shock at the unexpected result. Why would you fail that? It tastes good, doesn't it? Tsuna's expression remained calm as he questioned Shinomiya's decision. However, Shinomiya was unfazed as he calmly adjusted his glasses. You changed my recipe. You failed to do such a simple job, yet you dared to ask. I didn't change it. You think I'm St. Tsuna raised his hand to silence Shinomiya, who was about to rebuke him, and continued, narrowing his eyes, I improved your recipe. What did you say? Shinomiya's expression darkened at those words, and the other students looked at Tsuna in shock. I said your 9 vegetable terrine tasted terrible. So I added a pinch of paprika to deepen the flavor. Shinomiya felt insulted, his expression turning cold. It might have a bit more flavor, but you still failed to follow my recipe. You're disqualified as a chef if you can't even follow a simple order. Disqualified? From you? You're just a trash who got stuck, following you will only fuck me up. Shinomiya's expression suddenly changed at those words. Tsuna's words were like pouring salt on a fresh wound as Shinomiya tightly clenched his fist in anger. Do you even understand what you're saying just now? Why? You think I said anything wrong? Tsuna's eyes were cold as both of them stared into each other's eyes, plunging the atmosphere in the room into frozen silence. If you want to prove me wrong, then let's do it the cook's way. He lowered his tone as he declared, food war. I'm sure you will end up crying. You sure are barking quite loudly for a puppy. Shinomiya felt his veins bulging out of his forehead. To be insulted like this was unacceptable, which made his answer quite obvious. He decided to teach this prick a lesson. Alright then, sure, I'll take back my words if you win, but... Shinomiya fixed his glasses. His eyes gleamed with a fierce light, and he continued, but if you lose, you should stop cooking for the rest of your life. You don't deserve to be a cook. Everyone who was watching the sudden challenge for a food war widened their eyes in shock at the bet. Chapter 24, Chapter 23, Vegetable Duel. Did my eyes deceive me, or is it just an illusion? Probably not, or we might as well be soulmates since we saw the same illusion. But, aren't you both dudes? Murmurs of disbelief echoed through the room as they heard how Tsuna had just challenged Shinomiya to a food war. It wasn't just anyone, but Shinomiya. The former first seat of the 10 elite councils of the Totsuki Culinary Academy. He was the first one to have won the Plus Bowl Awards in France. That award alone proved Shinomiya's capability as a chef and undeniably could be considered a world-class chef. Oh? Isn't this interesting? A food war between a student and an alumnus, hey? This should be quite a sight to see. Oh my, oh my. A voice suddenly interrupted the tense atmosphere as both Tsuna and Shinomiya turned to look at Dojima, who was walking up to them, with Inui following behind with a smile. Dojima-san. Shinomiya adjusted his glasses and looked at Dojima with a hint of surprise before he furrowed his eyebrows in displeasure. He noticed Inui and clicked his tongue. Hinako, hey. Why is your reaction so different? Inui pouted and then bombarded Shinomiya with words, speaking rapidly like a machine gun. Shut the fuck up, Hinako. He sharply narrowed his eyes at her, prompting her to bow instantly. My apologies. She gracefully apologized, a stark contrast to her childish attitude moments before. Oh. Tsuna raised his eyebrows as he observed their interactions. Meanwhile, Dojima looked at Tsuna with a serious expression, silently musing to himself, I was about to intervene somehow, as it would be unfortunate to overlook such talent. But Ito seems to understand Shinomiya's character well enough to use it against him. He could see that Tsuna's insult was calculated, targeting Shinomiya's pride directly. He understood that Shinomiya was prideful enough to not let such insults slide by. The fact that Tsuna further aggravated Shinomiya's wound and his insecurity made Dojima narrow his eyes in skepticism. How did he even know that? Dojima knew that Shinomiya had been facing a wall that stopped him from growing lately. As his senpai, Dojima felt the need to extend a helping hand somehow, to lift him up or push him forward so he could overcome whatever was blocking him. We won't be able to hold an official food war, but we can still do something similar. Dojima spoke as they turned their attention back to him. He smiled as he continued, a street fight, or basically an unofficial food war. Do you both still want to do this? Unless he's afraid, nothing is stopping me. Tsuna shrugged, which made Shinomiya grit his teeth. Ha! Afraid? As if. Then, it's decided. Dojima chuckled as he then turned to Tsuna, you have to finish your next assignment first, so we'll do it afterward. Make sure you both come to the basement later in the afternoon. I'll think about all the necessary stuff, and just be ready, to decide which one of you is better. Shinomiya glared at him coldly before scoffing as he left. Tsuna just smirked, silently thinking, what a fool. Now, all that's left is to win this. By winning this, he could assimilate himself with the advanced earthbending, which he was looking forward to more than the street fight against Shinomiya. After that, Tsuna also left after bidding his farewell to Dojima. It's definitely better than Shinomiya-senpai's recipe, but... Inui approached Tsuna's 9 terrine vegetable and mumbled. Her eyes were quite different from her usual playful ones, and she continued, this might not be enough to face him. It's obvious that he seems to dislike vegetables. Dojima also nodded as he took a bite. Although it was definitely still above a student's level, he could feel the reluctance to cook it in the taste. But such a trait isn't good if you're a chef, Ito-kun, he murmured to himself before his eyes flashed with a cold glint, seems like I know the theme for the street fight later. This will be my lesson to you, Ito. Someone who was talented would require a building block for him to fly higher. Dojima was planning to be that building block himself so that Tsuna could realize why he should cook without prejudice against vegetables, and that way, he would be able to grow further. As the students went to complete their second assignment for the day, rumors started to spread about Tsuna challenging the alumni to a food war. Many just shrugged it off as a mere rumor, seeing Tsuna himself seemed to be nonchalant about it and still acted as he usually did during the second assignment. By the time they completed the second assignment, to their relief, there wouldn't be any additional assignments that day. They took a deep breath of relief as they entered the hotel lobby. Meanwhile, Tsuna slowly went to the basement and found a door leading to a hidden kitchen. So, it's him. Sekimori looked at Tsuna as he walked in, raising his eyebrows in surprise. Godota looked at Tsuna, putting his hand on his chin and muttering in Italian, "Oh mio. I don't take responsibility if Chef Chapelle finds out." Mizuhara spoke from her position squatting on a chair intended for the judges. She glanced at Shinomiya, who stood facing her on one of the countertops, and continued, "I'd blame it on Shinomiya. You're as impolite as always, Mizuhara." Shinomiya adjusted his glasses as he retorted. However, his eyes remained locked on Tsuna's figure as he walked over to his side on the other countertop. MMMPH. A muffled sound reached Tsuna's ears as he turned to see Inui, tied to a chair with her mouth taped shut. She looked at him with a hopeful expression. Speechless, he felt his mouth twitch at the sight before him. Yet, everyone else seemed rather casual about it as he shrugged it off. He chose to ignore Inui's pleading gaze directed at him as well. Well, then, let's get started before Chef Chapelle finds out. Dojima gathered both Tsuna and Shinomiya's attention. Those three will be the judges today, he said, gesturing to Sekimori, Mizuhara, and Godota. He then pointed at the leftover vegetables on the table as he continued, feel free to make whatever you want with the vegetables. The only requirement is to use them as the main ingredients for your dish. Upon hearing that they were about to cook vegetables, Tsuna frowned, a reaction Shinomiya noticed. Shinomiya asked mockingly, "Why? Are you afraid now?" But Tsuna just ignored him, raising a hand, which made Shinomiya feel his veins bulge out of his temple as he cursed under his breath, "Arrogant prick. Wait a minute. Yes." Dojima frowned as he asked, "Do you have any problem with the theme?" "No, but..." Tsuna then moved his hand over and pointed at two other students in the room. What the hell are these two doing here? It was Alice and Ryo. Humph. I'm here to watch, of course. Alice just scoffed and crossed her arms on her chest. Still, why are you going around looking for trouble? She sprinted over to Tsuna's side and leaned closer, tilting her head in confusion while putting her finger on her cheek. Alice blinked and continued, "Geez, Ito-kun. Seems like Trouble is your middle name, hey." Tsuna just shook his head and decided to ignore her as she turned to Ryo. "What about you?" "I'm just following her." "Fair enough," or so Tsuna thought with a long sigh. He scratched his head and turned to Dojima. "All right, go on." Tsuna's casual tone, as if he didn't even put an ounce of significance on the street war, left everyone speechless, and Shinomiya seemed to be even more angered. Chapter 25, Chapter 24, A Happy Terrain. Dojima looked at Tsuna in silence for a while before he nodded and continued, "That's about it. You'll have 2 hours to finish it all and serve. Then, show us your worth, and begin now," he declared, and both Tsuna and Shinomiya calmly took the ingredients and placed them on their countertops. "Mao, Ito-kun. Don't lose." Alice grumbled from the sidelines, watching with an annoyed expression. However, her pupils shook with concern. She silently rooted for Tsuna. "You've won our fight. Don't you dare lose before I get to catch up." "Lose? That's cute." Tsuna chuckled as he glanced at the vegetables on his countertop. "Now, let's see what I should do with all of you shitty vegetables." His eyes gleamed with cunning as he began to move. Isn't that?" Mizuhara looked at Tsuna in surprise, recognizing the choice of vegetables and the way he moved, which indicated what he was about to make. Sekimori squinted as he observed Tsuna and muttered, "Is he making a terrine?" Against Shinomiya. "Dio mio, that's certainly quite a surprise." Godota exclaimed with his thick Italian accent, nodding in agreement. "Still. What on earth are you planning, Ito?" Dojima narrowed his eyes at Tsuna. If Tsuna was planning to make that terrine dish he made a while ago, he was certainly looking for trouble. Even with her mouth taped shut, Inui still nodded in agreement with Dojima's sentiment. Moving on to the okra, Tsuna carefully trimmed off the ends and sliced them into rounds, discarding any tough stems. Then, he moved on to the zucchini, cutting it into thin slices and breaking the cauliflower into small florets. Despite the alumnus murmurs being clearly heard, Tsuna was unfazed as he kept moving from one vegetable to another. "Ha, what a fool!" Shinomiya scoffed from the side, seeing the familiarity of Tsuna's movement and his choice of vegetables. As the aroma of his dish filled the air, his confidence grew. Shinomiya carefully arranged the stuffed tomatoes on a platter, their golden brown tops glistening in the light. He garnished each one with a sprig of fresh parsley, adding a pop of color and freshness to the dish. "You're surely barking on the wrong tree. This will be more than enough to kill off your arrogance." Shinomiya made his way over to the judges' table with a confident stride as their eyes lit up in expectation. He placed the dish on the table, speaking plainly, "Tomatoes farcies, enjoy." "Oh? Seems like you're done. It's been a while since I tasted your cooking, Shinomiya." Ekalo. They each took a bite, closing their eyes in blissful expressions. The flavors exploded on their tongues, each ingredient complementing the other and seemingly overwhelming their palate with goodness. "The tomato is so tender." Sekimori spoke with a smile as he took another bite. Mizuhara nodded, "And the meat, you actually used chicken meat for this? This is certainly not your ordinary tomato farce." "Mamma mia!" Godota was enjoying it so much that he kept exclaiming in delight. "That's so good!" Indeed. They were utterly satisfied with Shinomiya's tomatoes farcies. However, "You're truly stagnated, hey?" Dojima silently thought as he looked at the smug Shinomiya. Although it tasted great, he knew it was still the same as it tasted a few years ago. Still, such a creation was enough to acknowledge him as a world-leading chef, making Dojima's eyes gleam. He then looked at Tsuna, silently considering, "I hope you're not going to disappoint me with the same dish you cooked this morning." Besides that, Dojima was also thinking of a way for Tsuna not to get expelled if he actually lost this. "Now, it's time to see our other contestant, right?" What is he doing?" Everyone turned to look at Tsuna as he suddenly took a jar of some white powder out of nowhere, which made them blink in confusion. Ito-kun, no way, right?" Alice quietly murmured on the side, seeming familiar with that jar since he had used it last time they cooked in the same class. Ryo also blinked in confusion. However, Tsuna's expression remained stony as he opened the jar and sprinkled some of the white powder into his dish with his elbow out, the powder smoothly traveling through his skin into the dish. The room suddenly went dead quiet as they witnessed Tsuna sprinkle the white powder. Message didn't belong here. That should be the case when the main ingredient was vegetables. Just as they were wondering what he was doing, Tsuna already made his way toward the judges. He put down the plate in front of them and spoke, "Have a taste." "Oh? Right." Mizuhara spoke as the others nodded before taking their fork and knife to taste the vegetable terrine before them. "This certainly looks impressive, but, Sekimori nodded as he took a bite, suddenly standing up in shock and widening his eyes. The other judges had the same reaction. Shock and amazement as the flavors exploded on their tongues. They were overcome with shock and disbelief. Is this really a vegetable-based dish?" Mizuhara's eyes widened in astonishment, her taste buds tingling with delight. The vegetables, meticulously prepared and expertly layered, melted in their mouths like butter, leaving behind a trail of savory goodness. "Such a smooth consistency, you must have added mayo and olive oil to the egg yolk," Sekimori exclaimed. Godada's eyebrows shot up in surprise, and by adjusting the proportions of milk and olive oil just right, you can achieve a lighter, more velvety sauce that will complement the vegetables beautifully. But the vegetable choices. This is not just your ordinary 9-vegetable terrine. Mizuhara, who had stood up from her squatting position, exclaimed at the unexpected flavor they tasted from the dish. Alice and Ryo were shocked to see the judge's reaction, contrasting with Shinomiya's darkened expression. "That's right." Tsuna smirked as he continued, "I added a pinch of smoked paprika for depth. That was what he did earlier this morning. But it's not over yet, and a dash of cayenne pepper for a subtle kick. He also substituted the yellow summer squash with roasted eggplant for smoky undertones. Why you combined such flavors to be compatible with the message?" Mizuhara looked at him in shock. The rest of the judges were the same. Even Dojima, who tasted it, was also in shock as he looked at Tsuna in disbelief. "Seems like I still underestimated you. You noticed?" "I guess as expected from an alumnus." Tsuna chuckled as his expression suddenly changed. He suddenly closed his eyes and raised his chin at an angle as he shifted into his preaching mode. "I hate vegetables. They never taste good on my palate. Vegetables taste sad, but it's not just for me. Vegetables are not meant for everyone. In fact, most people hate vegetables just like I do." Tsuna took a long sigh as he slowly opened his eyes. He then narrowed his eyes sharply as he spread his arms wide, "But my terrine changed that. Now everyone can enjoy vegetables just as they enjoy any other dish. They will taste it and never be sad again. This is my terrine. The Bino, a happy terrine," Tsuna declared as he flashed them a smirk. The room suddenly fell silent, and they all looked at him as if he were crazy. Alice face-palmed as she felt her face flush red in second-hand embarrassment. Glancing at Tsuna with a frustrated gaze, she muttered, "So ridiculous, and what was that name? You certainly just made it up on the spot." On his side, despite his emotionless face, Ryo looked away with a hint of redness on his cheeks. Meanwhile, Shinomiya tightly clenched his fist, his eyes widening in disbelief. Just by their reactions, he could roughly guess what was going on. "Am I seriously losing to a student? Me? Kojiro Shinomiya." Chapter 26, Chapter 25, Preach. Dojima looked at Tsuna's happy terrine in silence, sighing inwardly. He regarded Tsuna with a complicated gaze, silently acknowledging, "His talent is terrifying. Mao. What the hell are you doing? Message? In a vegetable terrine?" Alice berated Tsuna for such a ridiculous action, but Tsuna stood his ground. "Does it taste good?" It does," Alice admitted honestly after taking a bite herself. "Then, it's good enough." "No. But it's unhealthy." Still, she couldn't help but pout as she started pointing at Tsuna's face, finding faults in whatever he was doing. "Greatness is expensive. If you won't sacrifice for it, you won't be able to taste it. That's not how it works." Ryo stood casually a little bit away from them, avoiding getting involved. Dojima shook his head, observing the scene and reflecting on his plan to use this food war as a stepping stone for Tsuna's growth. However, it seemed unnecessary now. Nevertheless, he turned to Shinomiya, whose expression had darkened considerably. With a sigh, Dojima took out some pennies from his pocket and handed one to each of the judges, saying, "Let's decide. Place your coin on the plate of the chef you believe should win." Silence enveloped the group as they all regarded Shinomiya with a sigh before placing their coins on the respective plates. "I see, it's quite obvious, hey." Dojima silently thought as he watched the judges place their coins on the same plate. And that plate belonged to Tsuna. "Then, let me announce it here. The winner of this unofficial food war between Tsunayoshi Ito and Kojiro Shinomiya shall be Tsunayoshi Ito," Dojima declared. A sinking feeling settled in the pit of Shinomiya's stomach, bitterness rising in his throat as he clenched his teeth. Deep down, he knew that Tsuna's dish had won them over. Still, amidst his swirling emotions, a flicker of doubt started to rise. Shinomiya's mind raced, searching for explanations. For someone or something to blame. He questioned the circumstances, the judge's judgment, even Dojima's authority. How could he, Shinomiya, be bested by a mere student? It was a blow to his ego, his pride. "I'm the best? So, how could I be defeated by a mere student?" His expression twisted with a mix of disbelief and anger as those thoughts raced through his mind. How could they choose Tsuna over him? It felt unfair and unjust. Seeing Shinomiya's expression, they couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. They understood Shinomiya's prideful nature, so it was definitely hard for him to accept. "I'm sorry, Shinomiya. But I had to, it's inevitable. Your tomatoes farces was great, but... Scusa, Shinomiya." Their words were heavy with regret as they shook their heads in resignation. Shinomiya's fists clenched tightly, his nails digging into his palms as he struggled to contain his frustration. "Are they showing me pity? To me?" The notion of being pitted by the judges only fueled his indignation. "How dare you?" Shinomiya muttered under his breath as his eyes flashed with fierce intensity, "This is ridiculous." His voice boomed, reverberating through the room as he unleashed his fury. He refused to accept the decision. "It's simply impossible." Godota looked at Shinomiya in shock. Mizuhara was in a similar state as she hadn't expected Shinomiya to react with such ferocity as she then frowned. "You're blaming it on us." Meanwhile, Inui, who was taped and tied to a chair, couldn't help but tear up. She felt a pang of sadness at the sight of Shinomiya's current state. The judges are clearly biased. They couldn't even appreciate the true flavor. His anger soared to new heights, his accusations flying like arrows aimed at the integrity of the judges. "Shinomiya, you..." As Shinomiya's tirade continued, Dojima's expression darkened, his patience wearing thin. Sekimori furrowed his eyebrows, his voice tinged with irritation. "Are you questioning our qualification, Shinomiya?" "Of course, I am. How could a mere student best me?" Shinomiya's finger jabbed accusingly at Tsuna, who remained calm amidst the chaos. "You? What kind of trickery did you do? Pathetic." "Hey? What did you say, you little twat?" Tsuna's cold response caught Shinomiya off guard, fueling his rage even more. With a sudden burst of fury, he charged at Tsuna, his anger boiling over. "You might want to think twice." "Shut up." Seeing Shinomiya rushing towards him, Tsuna simply chuckled. But before Shinomiya could reach him, a strong hand grabbed him, holding him back. "Let me go, Dojima." Dojima's own anger flared at the sight of Shinomiya's outburst, but he released his grip nonetheless. However, before Shinomiya could react, Dojima swung his arm sharply, his fist connecting with Shinomiya's face and sending him crashing to the ground. "Motherfucker, what do you think you're doing, Dojima?" Shinomiya's voice rang out, laced with pain and indignation as he struggled to regain his footing, his vision blurred. "Shinomiya, stop being stupid. Acknowledge your loss, aren't you stagnating?" The words struck Shinomiya like a lightning bolt, leaving him frozen in disbelief. "Hey, Four Eyes!" Shinomiya was jolted back to reality by the cold voice, turning to find Tsuna approaching him. "Why don't you have a bite?" He looked down at Tsuna's hand, where Tsuna held out a portion of his happy terrine. "Why would? Just do as I told." A chilling aura enveloped Shinomiya, sending shivers down his spine as he met Tsuna's icy gaze. His whole body trembled under the weight of that stare, his thoughts scattering like leaves in the wind. If I truly rushed at him, Shinomiya's throat felt dry as he swallowed nervously, sweat dampening his back. He stared at Tsuna, a silent question lingering in his mind, just who is this guy? Tsuna observed in silence as Shinomiya tentatively reached for the fork, taking a hesitant bite. Shinomiya widened his eyes in shock as the flavor exploded within his palate. Memories suddenly flashed before his eyes, as if he were seeing a pillar in the middle of a desert and deciding to climb it to reach greater heights. This. He found himself at the peak, with nowhere else to go, and tightly clenched his fist. However. Boom! A loud explosion was heard, causing him to look down at the bottom only to see Tsuna destroying the base of the pillar. As he slowly fell back to the ground, Shinomiya snapped back to reality. Shinomiya looked at Tsuna in shock. You think you've reached the peak? That's arrogant. Tsuna's words sharply pierced his heart, hurting his pride. However, Tsuna continued, do you even know the world? Let me ask you this simple question. The world. You've reached the peak of a mountain, where else to go? Where else? No we. Four eyes, you are foolish. Of course. Tsuna raised his hand and pointed upward, causing Shinomiya to widen his eyes, the Sealai. Slap. Tsuna slapped Shinomiya before he could finish his answer. His glasses almost fell off his face as rage swirled within him, but... It's the sky, you fool. Those words instantly washed away all of his anger as he widened his eyes in shock, his pupils trembling as if he had just realized something profound. And what's above the sky? Another one. Then another. Then another. Just get straight to the point, Ito Baka. Alice interrupted annoyedly from the side. Tsuna turned to her with a frown, but there are 7 skies. Mao. But it's a myth. And it doesn't matter. She rolled her eyes at him. All right, Tsuna said, turning back to Shinomiya, above the sky, there is a galaxy and so on and so forth. I understand now. Shinomiya clenched his fist, this time in acknowledgement. However, Tsuna seemed to have more to say as he pulled out a jar of white powder from seemingly nowhere and shoved it to Shinomiya's hand. The next step after climbing the highest mountain is to ascend to the sky. But it's impossible for humans to do so on our own, we build a plane to achieve it. And this is... That's correct. This is the plane, the one and only, the cocaine of cooking, and the king of flavors, message. Shinomiya looked at the jar of message and grasped it firmly in his hand. He was enlightened. The room suddenly fell into a loud silence as those present couldn't help but twitch their lips slightly, speechless at the scene. Chapter 27, Chapter 26, Shinomiya has fallen. So, that's how you've reached the sky. Shinomiya murmured before letting out a long sigh and adjusting his glasses. His anger dissipated, replaced by a new determination shining in his eyes. Shinomiya-senpai, you don't actually believe what that jerk said, do you? Alice approached him, a wry smile on her face, hoping to steer Shinomiya away from the wrong path. She's right, Shinomiya. You might want to reconsider. Mizuhara interjected while Inui nodded in agreement from her chair with muffled sounds. Godota and Sekimori exchanged uncertain glances, unsure of how to respond, while Dojima simply nodded at Shinomiya. Well, at least he's in a better state of mind now than before. When a talented cook like Shinomiya hit a wall, he had nowhere else to turn as hardly anyone could offer him guidance. Either he needed to realize it on his own. He thought silently as his gaze drifted to Tsuna, who approached his own countertop, or have someone even more talented to guide him. Still, Dojima felt relieved to see that Shinomiya seemed to have an idea of where to go next, which achieved what he had been attempting to do all along. This might be for the better, Dojima thought as he observed Shinomiya suddenly bow his head. I apologize for doubting your judgment and qualifications earlier. He then glanced at each of his friends and sighed, I was too proud and angered by the fact that I lost to a student. It infuriated me to display such an unsightly side of myself. But I suppose Ito is right, there is a sky beyond the sky. I should humble myself a bit and admit my defeat. Shinomiya looked at Tsuna's happy terrine before turning to the jar of white powder in his hand. Silently, he thought, with this, I shall also break through my barrier. He's fallen, Mizuhara murmured, disbelief written all over her face, while Alice nodded in shock and concurred, there's no turning back now. Inui's muffled sound also carried a tinge of sadness. Sekimori swallowed his speechlessness, sighed, and patted Shinomiya's shoulder, that's fine, Shinomiya. We all make mistakes, and that's normal. It's great that you realized that. I'm looking forward to your improvement. Thank you, Sekimori-san. I agree with Sekimori-senpai. It's fine to make mistakes, and I'm also glad to see you finally back on track. Bravo, Shinomiya. Godota gave him a thumbs up, and Shinomiya nodded with a small smile. SSSS. SSSS. However, a sizzling sound filled the air, and a distinct aroma of meat slowly permeated the room, catching everyone off guard. They turned to Tsuna, who was searing a piece of meat. Ito-kun, what are you doing? Sekimori was hardly surprised by anything, but this time, he found himself speechless. Cooking steak, I'm hungry. Tsuna replied casually, as if it was something normal, which plunged the room into silence once again. After a few minutes, he flipped the steaks over, ensuring each side got that perfect sear, golden brown and full of flavor. Seeing he was still at it, Alice couldn't take it anymore. She pointed her finger at him and shouted, "Mao! What's wrong with you? Don't you still have your terrine? Just eat that. You told me to eat vegetables." Tsuna's face contorted in disgust as he glanced at the happy terrine on the judge's table and scoffed, "Ha, I'd rather eat meat. Vegetables taste like sad. You hate vegetables." Mizuhara murmured in surprise, looking at the happy terrine, and continued, "And yet you were able to come up with something that defeated an alumnus. And it's not just any random alumnus. It's Shinomiya. He's the former holder of the first seat of the Elite 10 Councils of the 79th generation. It was just a bit difficult to chew. Who would believe that someone who seemed to hate vegetables could actually create a vegetable-based dish that could surpass even someone who specialized in it? She wouldn't believe that either, but seeing what was happening in front of her eyes, Mizuhara felt like she should upgrade her common sense a little bit. Why not? Vegetables are good for your body. I don't need it, all I need is protein. Alice went up to Tsuna and kept berating him, but he seemed unfazed and continued to cook. He tossed in a knob of butter, letting it melt and bubble in the pan. Ha ha ha. I see, I see. Dojima laughed at Tsuna's peculiarity and nodded with a smile, I guess common sense doesn't work on you, hey. How arrogant was he to try and give someone like this a lesson? Dojima shook his head with a wry smile as he approached, could you cook more for me too, Ito? Give me a piece as well. Shinomiya also joined in with a small shake of his head. He looked at Tsuna with a complicated expression, as if he were a frog at the bottom of a well. He couldn't help but think, I guess he's just better, and that's it. Shinomiya was utterly convinced now that Tsuna had reached a level higher than him. The rest of the alumni joined in, resembling customers waiting for their food to be served. Sure, pay me 10,000 yen for each steak. Tsuna replied while basting the steaks with melted butter, ensuring they were coated in all that savory goodness. Ito baka. Why are you charging us money? It's Totsuki's meat in the first place. Why are you always shouting like your cousin? Tsuna sighed as he added, who said it was for the steak? Hey! It's for my service. His expression turned stony, leaving everyone speechless as they silently cursed, shameless. Still, Tsuna remained unfazed by their gaze, fully aware of what they thought of him. He just chuckled to himself, silently thinking, the world is harsh. Don't blame this broke guy for monetizing everything kikik. Once the steaks were cooked to juicy perfection, Tsuna transferred them to a plate to rest for a bit. Slowly, he then served everyone one plate each, and they began to devour it, including himself. Mamma mia! So good! Gototo exclaimed, his face flushed red as he kept taking one bite after another. The meat literally melted in his mouth like butter, and the strong flavor, along with the sprinkle of message, dominated his entire palate. Mizuhara sighed as she looked at Tsuna, who started giving her friends his bank account information. She muttered, his character might be a bit questionable, but his cooking is undoubtedly one of the best I've ever tasted. Sekimori spoke in agreement. Both of them looked at the empty plate in front of them with a complicated expression. Please send the money by tonight. Sigh. Mizuhara and Sekimori sighed in unison upon hearing those words. Dojima checked the time on his wrist as he spoke, it's time for us to go, the students still have another assignment this evening. Oh, right, almost forgot about that. I guess it's time to go. Let's go. The alumni agreed as they all stood up. Dojima turned to look at Tsuna, Alice, and Ryo as he spoke, I was originally going to warn you to be cautious about the next assignment for tomorrow, but I guess I shouldn't even be worried at all. I guess so. Tsuna shrugged his shoulders as they slowly left the basement. As they finally made their way to the lobby, Alice suddenly asked. Ah, senpais, what about Inui-senpai? Alice's question made everyone stop in their tracks as they finally realized something important. They had forgotten to free Inui from the chair. A loud muffled sound of someone crying was heard inside the basement kitchen, causing the cleaner who was doing his job to suddenly feel scared and run away. Chapter 28, Chapter 27, Breakfast Challenge. As Tsuna continued to do his assignment, everyone was looking at him. Did he really challenge Shinomiya-senpai to a food war? But considering the fact that he's still here, does that mean he won? Murmurs of disbelief echoed as rumors about what was going on within Shinomiya's morning class had spread all over the place. There is no way he won, that means it's just a cap. Agree, I think people are just making stuff up. However, some of them started to doubt it since they simply couldn't believe the rumors of a food war being held, especially since Tsuna seemed fine doing his assignment. However, Tsuna couldn't care less about what other people thought of him as he left the room after completing the assignment. He glanced at the transparent screen notification before his eyes that nobody else could see but him. Mission completed. Congratulations! You have successfully initiated a food war against an alumnus and won. Receive the reward? Y/N. Note, once you accept, the mission will be considered over, and you shall receive the reward immediately. Oh! Finally, you showed up. He smiled a little as he immediately accepted it, feeling a familiar sensation spread over his body, making him shudder as he closed his eyes. Phew! Tsuna let out a satisfied sigh, feeling a stronger sense of connection with the earth. Suddenly, he felt a weird vibration in his pocket, similar to the sensation he had felt with the earth. He took out a pair of steel chopsticks, his eyes widening slightly. Don't tell me. Tsuna began to focus on the chopsticks with his mind, feeling a stronger connection before the chopstick slowly bent accordingly, and he grinned. Interesting, so that means I could bend metal now. He had trained his earth bending to the point that he was able to shape the earth to his will as long as he focused his mind on it. Though it was a bit draining, he managed to do so. If I could do the same with steel. His eyes gleamed with a cold glint. That meant he could create weapons from even his chopsticks without anyone noticing. It was the ultimate hidden weapon. However, he immediately shook his head. Never mind, I'm no longer an assassin. Tsuna wouldn't overlook such an advantage, but he also wouldn't forget his current identity as a cook. Metal bending was a great addition to his current skill set, especially since he might embark on an adventure in a dangerous place depending on any sudden missions he might receive in the future. Though he could feel it required a higher amount of concentration and stamina, Tsuna was feeling satisfied with this discovery. He still needed to find out what else was different compared to the medium-level earth bending, but he was looking forward to seeing what more he could do with the higher level of earth bending. As Tsuna continued to walk through the corridor. Students of Totsuki Academy. Dojima's voice reverberated across the corridor through the speaker as he announced, in an hour from now at 10 p.m. Please report to the main hall in your uniform. Is it about the next assignment he said he was about to warn me about? Tsuna muttered as he put his hand on his chin thoughtfully. He shrugged his shoulder as he muttered with a smile, all right, let's see what you got next. After a while, the students started to fill up the main hall as they looked around in surprise. I thought we were not this small? What happened to the other students? You idiot, of course they were expelled. The crowded hall they had on the first day was nowhere to be seen, as the ones left were those who had survived through the assignments during the training camp. This made them realize just how hard it was to survive in the academy. They felt slightly proud of themselves and a bit cautious about what it was all about as they all looked at Dojima on the stage in front. Tsuna. Ito-kun. A loud voice and a timid one were heard as Tsuna turned to see Soma and Megami approaching him. You're actually still here. Soma looked at him in disbelief. I'm glad to still see you around. Megami placed her hand over her chest in a gesture of gratitude, her eyes glassy as if tears were about to flow. Tsuna chuckled as he gently patted Megami's head and turned to Soma. Why? Do you think I should just get myself expelled? No, that's not what I meant. Megami blinked at the head pat, her expression suddenly flushing red in embarrassment, while Soma shook his head in amazement as he continued, does that mean you won the food war? This time, both of them looked at Tsuna in amazement as he just shrugged it off and returned the question, what do you think? Soma was happy, but he couldn't help but tightly clench his fist. So, you truly beat Shinomiya-senpai, hey? I see. I have a long way to go, he silently thought, looking at Tsuna with a determined gaze. "We've gathered you here to inform you regarding tomorrow's assignment." A voice suddenly interrupted them, and everyone turned to see Dojima beginning to explain their next assignment for tomorrow. The students were required to choose or create a breakfast recipe to cook the following morning at 6 a.m. Eggs were decided as the basis for the dish they must create. However, they realized a problem after hearing the timeline and the assignment. Wait a minute. Like, tomorrow morning, at 6 am. He must be making a mistake, right? It's definitely supposed to be 6 p.m. Right. The students have all night to decide on a dish. And this fact alone almost guarantees that they won't get any sleep. Their whole bodies were trembling as they were truly on the verge of giving up. They felt like flipping the table over and just saying screw it and leaving. Irina turned to see Tsuna, her face blushing as she felt like she could see through Tsuna's uniform at the moment, recalling certain memories in her mind before she looked away. "Irina-sama." Hisako blinked in confusion at this, then turned to look at Tsuna, silently questioning, "Is there anything happening between these two?" "Ahaha, this is certainly an interesting challenge." Alice suddenly appeared out of nowhere, with Ryo following behind, as if trying to look intimidating. She looked at Tsuna as she spoke, "A competitive challenge. Why don't we see who can get more people to try our dish?" "Suit yourself." Tsuna just shrugged. His mind was thinking of finding an alternative since he usually went on a run in the morning to sweat a little. "This girl is? Ah, you were that girl from the first assignment." Soma exclaimed, pointing his finger at Alice. This made her pout in dissatisfaction as she turned to Ryo. "Ryo. Why is this fool shouting at me? He should be cowering in fear. You should do a better job of intimidating someone." "But young lady, I already did as you told me to." "Mao. You're not doing a good job then." She crossed her arms over her chest in annoyance as Soma just tilted his head in confusion. "So you're Soma Yukihira, hey?" Alice looked at him, narrowing her eyes. Her playful expression was nowhere to be found. She glanced at the guy who had a dumb expression on his face from head to toe, recalling Tsuna's capability and wondering if Soma would be on par since he also talked big during the opening ceremony. She chuckled, "I'm looking forward to your performance." Alice continued as she left them, with Ryo following behind. Soma looked at her with a serious expression before his face returned to its usual one, and he turned to Tsuna. "Anyway, who is she again, Tsuna?" Chapter 30, Chapter 28, Sweat and Snooze. "Alright, that's it. You're free to go to the kitchen now or go to sleep. It's your own choice. But make sure to be ready to serve at 6 am tomorrow." Dojima walked off the stage after explaining about the next challenge, then headed out of the main hall before making his way to an office for the chefs and staff for Totsuki Friendship and Rapport Training Camp. As he walked in, he saw Chef Chapelle sitting on the sofa, holding a report for the students' training camp today. He nodded at him as their eyes met. "Chapelle-sensei, are you not going to rest?" "I'll stay around for a bit, what about you?" Chef Chapelle shook his head while looking at Dojima with his usual stern expression. "I guess I'm also staying for a bit more," Dojima spoke. He figured he still had some stuff to do at his desk. However, Chef Chapelle suddenly spoke, "I heard you held an unofficial food war. Why don't you tell me a bit more about it?" "Ah, so you have heard of it, hey?" Dojima gave a wry smile at Chef Chapelle. Seeing those sharp eyes directed at him, he knew Chef Chapelle was quite dissatisfied with them for doing that. "Of course, you almost expelled the brightest talent I've ever seen. How could I not know of that?" "Well, I can't argue with that. But isn't he still around?" You're right." Chef Chapelle furrowed his eyebrows before nodding. He then sighed, seemingly concerned about the said student, as he asked, "So how was it? He's not badly beaten, right?" He was genuinely worried if such a setback would bring down the student's mentality and might affect his growth. However, "Hey? Badly beaten? Not at all, since technically he's badly beating." "Pardon?" Dojima couldn't believe he would say this, but it was indeed the case as he explained, "Yeah, it's just as you heard. That student won." "He won? Against Shinomiya?" Chef Chapelle simply couldn't believe his ears. He then pointed at the sofa in front of him as he spoke, "Come sit down, Dojima. I need to hear more of this." "Alright, so this is what happened." Dojima then sat down and told Chef Chapelle what had been happening since the beginning. As he spoke, Chef Chappelle's expression grew more amazed, and he smiled, as expected of the brightest talent I've ever seen. Dojima looked at the earnest smile that came from Chef Chappelle, a bit surprised, before nodding in understanding. He himself also understood Chef Chappelle's feelings, so he nodded as well. Right, seems like our future is quite promising. That's true, Chef Chappelle nodded with a smile. He couldn't help but feel a bit hopeful about what kind of changes the student would bring to their academy as he muttered, he's hardworking and has the talent for it. I can't wait to see you sit at the highest and lead the world with your cooking, Tsunayoshi Ito. Meanwhile. Hey? You're going to sleep already? Soma exclaimed in disbelief as he looked at Tsuna perplexedly. However, Tsuna just yawned as he answered, I'm tired, I need to go to bed. But we barely checked what's going on in the kitchen, though. Soma scratched his head confusedly as he looked around where all the other students were busy looking through some ingredients they might need for tomorrow's assignment. Some of them were even busy trying out different spices and combinations. I can't sleep late at night. To me, sleeping is important. Tsuna shrugged his shoulders while glancing at the busy people in the kitchen. He trained hard and slept hard. Besides, he had already decided on what to make tomorrow after seeing what they had in the kitchen. Humph! What a lazy bum! A loud shout echoed as a blonde guy and a slightly taller yet chubby one approached them. Soma's eyes lit up in recognition of the new faces as he waved his hand and chuckled, oh! The Aldini twins! Nichan, you're shouting too loud. Isamiya whispered while glancing around and noticing that their shouting had attracted some disapproving side eyes from others nearby. Takumi also noticed this, feeling a slight flush of embarrassment in his cheeks as he cleared his throat, ahem, anyway. Since this assignment is a competitive one, he narrowed his eyes and pointed his finger at Tsuna and Soma, declaring, I will show you both a supreme Italian breakfast egg in Aldini style. You! Tsunayoshi Ito! You talked big during the opening ceremony, so don't you dare go to bed early. You've got to perform tomorrow. Takumi continued, while Soma tilted his head and asked, oh? Italian breakfast egg? Sounds interesting. I wonder what it looks like. Well, Italian breakfast egg is pretty simple. Isami's chubby face brightened as he smiled and explained it to Soma, while Takumi rolled his eyes and quickly covered Isami's mouth. What the hell, Isami? Don't you dare tell our rival the secret. Ha ha ha. Laughter echoed as they all turned to see Tsuna laughing with a confused expression. However, Tsuna didn't seem to mind as he kept laughing a bit more before turning to Soma. Well, Soma, it seems like you have clowns around you. They're quite entertaining. Hey? What did you say? Takumi and even Isami, who was usually quite peaceful by nature, were taken aback. They had their expressions hardened upon being called clowns and stared fiercely at Tsuna. Tsuna just chuckled at the intense stare, waving goodbye as he spoke, all right, rival. I'm looking forward to your performance tomorrow. Wah! With that, he made his way out of the kitchen to return to his room for some rest, leaving both Takumi and Isami in shock with their mouths wide open. Nichan, I think he just called you rival. Yeah. I think so too. Takumi blinked in disbelief before suddenly smirking, his whole face beaming up as he spoke, as expected of our rival, Tsunayoshi Ito. He certainly knows respect. He wouldn't admit it, but he felt a sense of happiness when called a rival by Tsuna. It felt like his hard work in trying to prove them wrong had been fruitful and acknowledged. Unlike certain someone, Takumi turned to Soma, who was ignoring them, gritting his teeth. Humph! Whatever, let's go, Isami. He scoffed as he left, with Soma continuing to ignore them and go around looking for stuff. They also needed to figure out what to make for tomorrow's assignment after all. Seeing others busy on their own, they couldn't help but sigh, knowing it'd be a sleepless night. The next morning, Tsuna woke up feeling refreshed. He put on his uniform and headed down to the staff room to make a request before going to the kitchen to gather all the necessary ingredients and equipment for the day's assignment in the main hall. Oh, it seems we're neighbors. A voice called from behind, and Tsuna turned to see a person with dark skin and long, white hair tied in a ponytail. And you are? Akira Hayama. We're in the same cutting technique class. I see. Just a moment. Tsuna set down his supplies on the countertop and gestured to some nearby staff members, who began bringing an oddly big equipment over to his stand. Hayama observed the odd scene with a slightly perplexed expression before asking, You asked for a treadmill? For what? Oh, this. Tsuna glanced at the treadmill being set up, then turned to Hayama, "I gotta catch my morning run." Hayama regarded Tsuna with an expression akin to one observing a mentally ill person before quietly making his way to his own station, deciding that he would rather not talk with Tsuna. "That guy definitely got a screw loose in his head," he muttered while watching Tsuna thank the staff for setting it up, his lips twitching in speechlessness. Sigh finally. Done with the pitch this morning, it was a success. We're still eating out for dinner at a restaurant, but it seems like the negotiations went on smoothly. And finally. Chapter 31, Chapter 29, Akira Hayama. Hayama looked at Tsuna on the other side, slightly shaking his head as he muttered, "I knew he was crazy, but this is just a bit too much." He had heard the rumors spreading about Tsuna, and since they were in the same class for their cutting technique, he knew better that Tsuna was a capable chef just by his technique alone. Tsuna was a unique individual, almost isolated from the whole class, always finishing his assignments alone, yet still able to achieve perfect scores. During this training camp, Tsuna's name had become the talk of the students. A new rumor circulated that he had won a food war against alumni, which most were skeptical about. However, considering Tsuna's behavior so far, Hayama was actually leaning toward believing the rumors. "I should be able to confirm it here." His eyes narrowed slightly as he observed Tsuna, who was starting to prepare his station for the assignment. But then, he suddenly widened his eyes, almost falling to the floor when he saw what Tsuna had taken out. "I almost forgot he's got this strange habit of promoting his own business as well." Hayama felt his lips twitch slightly, observing Tsuna placing a D.I.Y sign with his restaurant address in Tokyo. "Whatever, if you're actually that good, you should be able to survive this, since I might attract all the people over to my station." Hayama was preparing Indian masala omelette. Considering the combination of spices he chose for the assignment, he was confident everything would go smoothly today. He looked at the 4 jars of different spices he held between his fingers and smiled before letting out a satisfied sigh. "Great combo, no one will be able to resist such aroma in the air for sure." He then glanced at the ingredients in front of him, checking the time and noticing there was still an hour left before the scheduled 6 a.m. start for their assignment. "Let's cook enough for now. Since the theme is a buffet, I should at least have some portions ready." With that, Hayama began working on his dish. "Oh, right. The money." Tsuna stopped for a moment, flipping open his phone to find several messages from the bank confirming the transfer of 10,000 yen each to his account for his services rendered during the unofficial street war. A smile spread across his face as he checked his bank balance, seeing it had increased to around 150,000 yen, which was close to $1,000. He muttered to himself, "So this is how it feels to earn money when you're broke, huh? Such an addictive feeling." Reflecting on how he had barely $10 a few weeks ago and now had this much, Tsuna felt a sense of accomplishment. It might not be a significant amount compared to what some people earned in seconds, but starting from the bottom made his progress all the more satisfying. "Alright, let's continue making my dish." Tsuna was about to prepare shawanmushi, a Japanese steamed egg custard. It was perfect for a buffet-style serving, with portions that were neither too big nor too small. However, just as he turned on the steamer at his station, a fresh wave of aromatic spices filled the air, causing him to widen his eyes and turn to look at the station right beside him, where he saw Hayama toasting spices in a skillet. "Oh? Look at that guy." Tsuna chuckled as he noticed Hayama briefly glance at him before continuing to sprinkle his spice mix, intensifying the aroma that enveloped the whole area around their station. It was clear that Hayama was challenging him. Tsuna couldn't help but smile at this and muttered, "Sure, I'll play along." He began cracking his egg, swiftly prepping each ingredient with precision. Next, Tsuna measured out the dashi, soy sauce, mirin, salt, and sesame oil, combining them in a bowl. As he worked on his shawanmushi, he placed it in the steamer. "Time to take back my territory," he murmured as he observed the steam billowing out like a gentle breeze of clouds. Soon after, the air became filled with an inviting aroma, akin to a warm hug on a chilly morning. The scent emanating from Tsuna's creation was like a melody in the air, gradually overpowering the aromatic fragrance from Hayama's spices as if asserting its dominance. Tsuna glanced at Hayama, who caught a whiff of the aroma and mouthed, "What do you think? Do you like it?" "Oh." Hayama smiled at Tsuna and responded, "Pretty decent." Both of them chuckled as the aroma from their station completely dominated the others around them. "Is everyone ready to serve?" A familiar voice resonated throughout the hall, signaling that it was time for the assignment to commence as Dojima continued, "Before I go into the requirements for the judges." "Whoa, it's open." "Yeah, finally. I'm already starving." The door to the main hall suddenly burst open as a bunch of children flooded in, accompanied by their parents and some professional-looking individuals. Dojima then introduced them as Totsuki's resort food suppliers and their families. "There." The students appeared surprised as the next group of people slowly made their way in. Dojima's voice echoed, "That's right, Totsuki's resort food department staff and chefs will also be the judges of today's assignment." Then, on to the requirements. Everyone listened intently as Dojima continued, "There are 2 requirements. First, you have to gain approval from professionals in the field, suppliers, and servers. The second requirement is to serve 200 portions within the next 2 hours. Those who meet the requirements shall pass." Dojima declared before turning his attention to the guests and adding, "Now, for our guests, please enjoy your breakfast." 200 servings? Damn, this is going to be tough. I need to hustle. God damn it. Why did I have to pick such a complicated menu? Feeling the pressure of the task ahead, the students hurriedly increased their pace in panic, knowing they had only 2 hours to complete the assignment. Despite the challenge, Tsuna and Hayama remained calm as a large group of people quickly gathered around their station, drawn by the enticing aroma wafting from their dishes. "Wah! It looks so good." A little girl, about 10 years old, gazed at the shawanmushi cups lined up on Tsuna's station with a sparkle in her eyes. Similarly, the rest of the crowd, especially the women, were captivated by Tsuna's dish. The presentation of the shawanmushi was stunning, their surfaces adorned with silky smooth custard that glistened invitingly under the soft glow of the kitchen lights. Each cup held a treasure trove of ingredients nestled within the velvety custard, a colorful mosaic of mushrooms, peas, and delicate strands of green onion peeking through the surface like hidden gems. The sight was visually appealing and absolutely appetizing. Those sights were satisfying to look at, with people flocking to the stations they were interested in. However, the same couldn't be said for the stations beside them. A tall, purple-haired female student felt sweat trickling down her forehead at the station right on the corner between Tsuna's and Hayama's stations. She was Mayuko Hojo. Noticing the ongoing aromatic battle that seemed to disrupt the whole atmosphere, with the judges all being pulled over to their stations without even glancing at hers, Hojo felt threatened. She looked at her spicy Sichuan scrambled eggs and gritted her teeth. "I'm in a pinch." Chapter 32, Chapter 30, Limited Edition Strategy. "The rumors are true, hey." Hojo observed the crowd flocking to Tsuna's stand while ignoring the others. She lightly bit her lip in frustration. Though she had never been in the same class as Tsuna before, he was quite notorious for stirring up trouble wherever he went. There was even a saying, "If you see him, you better look away." The day he first arrived, he declared war on the entire academy while shamelessly promoting his restaurant. In his first class, he single-handedly dominated a group assignment on his own. During the first day of their summer training, he confronted the entire class, leading to 10 students being expelled at once. And that food war with the alumni is said to involve Kojiro Shinomiya. Her logical reasoning contradicted that rumor, but her instincts suggested otherwise. Hojo couldn't help but watch the judges passing through the stations without sparing hers a glance as she sighed, "I suppose he's that formidable, but..." She couldn't help but admit that Tsuna truly was capable. Then, Hojo turned to look at Hayama's station, which was quite impressive as well, prompting her to mumble in disbelief, "And who is this guy? No. Just who are these 2? Are they even students like us?" Hojo's sentiment was shared among others whose stations were nearby, and they all regarded Tsuna and Hayama with complicated expressions. With so many people flocking to their stands, they feared they might face expulsion because of these 2. However, despite having a full crowd of people coming to his station, Hayama didn't seem to be satisfied. He furrowed his eyebrows as he looked at Tsuna in silence. "My aroma is clearly far more enticing since I've mixed ground turmeric, cumin, coriander, and garam masala." Those combinations of spices were a fatal combo for people with empty stomachs, as they'd feel as if they had been starving for days and immediately come to him to fill their empty stomachs. His omelette certainly had a stronger aroma compared to the soft breeze-like aroma from Tsuna's shawanmushi. Just what trick did he use to? Hayama muttered in wonder before his eyes widened in disbelief as he saw one of the people who was flocking into Tsuna's station devouring one after another at such a speed that seemed almost impossible. "Hey! You can't eat all of those." The way the woman devoured Tsuna's shawanmushi dissatisfied the others. However, she didn't seem to care as she retorted with a mouthful of food, "Who cares? It's a buffet. I can eat all I want." "Woman, what the fuck? We also want to eat more, you bitch." Such a response caused her public outrage as they were now getting physical and dragging her back, immediately trying to get Tsuna's shawanmushi as much as they could, like a competition. "I see, so that's why." Hayama put his hand over his mouth as his mind raced at the sight. He couldn't help but mutter, "A soft steamed egg, along with whatever you put in there, certainly is easier to chew compared to mine." Considering how good their reaction was when eating Tsuna's dish, the taste was certainly extraordinary, that it could even create such chaos. And it helps attract more attention as well. Hayama observed the people who were pointing at Tsuna's stand in curiosity at the chaos, then decided to check it out themselves, becoming part of the chaos. This might not be a competition, but... Hayama gritted his teeth, tightly clenching his fist as he felt like he was losing the challenge he had just started. He looked at Tsuna, who had stopped cooking, and said, "I'll remember this setback well, Tsunayoshi Ito." Oni-chan, why did you stop cooking?" a little girl asked Tsuna, cutely tilting her head to the side as she observed him putting down his apron. "Well, I've already cooked 200 servings. But..." The little girl was confused, noticing that the other students were still busy despite already cooking more than 200 servings that no one took. However, Tsuna didn't seem to mind as he pointed at the treadmill right behind his station and smiled, "I need to catch my morning run." "Ah!" The little girl could only look at Tsuna in shock, and the scene suddenly became even more chaotic as they realized that the shawanmushi they adored was a limited edition. Seeing this, Tsuna smirked as he turned on the treadmill and started to run. Knowing it was a limited edition and they might not get their hands on it again, it was instinctive for them to try to grab one by any means necessary. Creating a false sense of urgency always works. It was just a basic marketing strategy as Tsuna chuckled to himself. Before long, all of the shawanmushi in his stand disappeared, and a loud announcement followed, "Tsunayoshi Ito has completed 200 servings." "What? It's only been 30 minutes, though. He's already finished. Just what the heck?" The announcement echoed through the main hall, sending waves of astonishment among the students who were still struggling to serve 200 people and gain approval. "What?" Takumi Aldini exclaimed in shock, pausing his cooking momentarily to glance at where Tsuna was located. Suddenly, a smirk crossed his face, as expected of my rival. "You might be faster, but I won't give up." Feeling even more determined, Takumi increased his pace significantly, eliciting amazement from the crowd gathered in front of his station. Takumi might not have realized it, but he no longer felt frustrated by Tsuna surpassing him. Ever since Tsuna acknowledged him as a rival, Takumi felt even more motivated to excel. On the other hand, Irina, who was only halfway through her 180 servings, frowned upon hearing the announcement. "He's already finished." She couldn't help but feel slightly displeased upon hearing the news and muttered to herself, "He must have used some tricks." Irina then turned to look at Tsuna's station, located on the far side of the hall from where she was. However, she noticed something was amiss as she observed a disappointed crowd leaving. Frowning deeper at this perplexing sight, she wondered, why are they leaving? Is he finished cooking or something? Whatever. Why should I even care in the first place? So what if he's faster? He must have just been lucky. Irina scoffed before returning to her cooking, despite a large crowd waiting at her station. Despite her dismissive words, she felt a nagging curiosity urging her to go over and see just what Tsuna had done to achieve such a feat. Before long, another announcement was heard, stating that Irina had finished her assignment, followed by Hayama and Alice afterward. As time passed, Irina glanced at Soma, her neighbor, who seemed to be struggling at the moment. She then inspected her ingredients, muttering, "This should be the last batch." After this, she murmured to herself before turning her gaze to Tsuna's station across the hall and remarked, "I should pay him a visit." However, upon realizing what she had just said, her face flushed red in embarrassment. "I won't go there because I'm curious about what you did. I'll go there to show you that I've performed even better." Irina huffed lightly in displeasure, crossing her arms over her chest and pouting. Chapter 33, Chapter 31, Early Investment. Hayama glanced at his basket and found it empty. It's unfortunate, but that's all I have. There are still some other stations, so feel free to check them out," he announced to the expectant gazes directed at him from the crowd gathered in front of his station. That's so sad. I really wanted to try your omelette. Sigh, 2 great buffet menus just gone like that. Truly unfortunate. They couldn't help but feel saddened by the fact that these 2 stations, facing each other, had stopped serving their menus. Hayama could only offer them a wry smile and apologize. As much as he wanted to provide them with the food they desired, his hands were tied since he had run out of ingredients. I served a total of 250 plates, and that guy served a total of 200 plates. Hayama silently pondered, feeling his lips twitch as he glanced at Tsuna, who was running on the treadmill nonchalantly. Although he had served more plates, Hayama didn't feel good at all, knowing Tsuna hadn't even brought as many ingredients as he had. From the beginning, that guy just wanted to serve enough servings to pass. He shook his head as he began to clean up. However, Hayama briefly stole a glance at Tsuna, who was running at a pace that seemed a bit too fast for a casual jog. He couldn't help but mumble, is he really just trying to save time and catch his morning run? Whatever, I shouldn't even care about that anyway. Hayama felt it would be better to stop thinking about such an oddball as he picked up his pace in cleaning his station. On the other hand, the fact that those 2 stations, belonging to Tsuna and Hayama, who had been attracting all the judges, had closed down, gave hope to others around. The crowd finally turned their attention to them. This was their chance to catch the whole crowd's attention with their dish and complete their assignment. Miyoko Hojo, who had been on the verge of despair, finally saw a glimmer of hope within this unexpected situation. She couldn't help but feel relieved as people were surprised by her spicy Sichuan scrambled eggs. Wait. It's not too spicy. Really? The color is scary though. No, you gotta try this. You're right. Whoa. After a while, their reactions also started a domino effect as the crowd lost interest in other stations, which seemed quite ordinary, and began to flock to her station. They wanted to try something different, and Hojo's station offered exactly what they desired. Thank goodness, with this, I should be able to complete the assignment safely. Her legs felt weak as she forced herself to stand up and cook more servings for them. Only about half an hour had passed before they completed their assignment, and Hojo finally reached 200 servings. Phew. I guess I've sweated enough, Tsuna muttered as got off the treadmill. He then took his towel and wiped his sweat as a voice was heard from the side. Ito-kun, why aren't you cooking? I don't have enough time to serve more. Tsuna shook his head as he saw Alice leaning over to his station with a confused expression, noticing some ingredients left untouched. But you clearly still have more ingredients. Alice muttered to herself while leaning toward the station, placing her finger on her cheek. Well, anyway. She turned to Tsuna, a smug grin on her face. I'm not here to worry about that. I've served 380 servings this time, how many do you have? Oh, 380? That's a lot of servings. I've only done 200 servings. Hearing Tsuna mention a lower amount than hers, Alice proudly puffed out her chest, pointing her finger at Tsuna. Phew, of course, that'd be the case. It's solid proof that I'm way better. Hey. However, in the middle of her sentence, she suddenly realized that her eyes were widening and her confidence was faltering. Wait, how many did you say? I only did 200 servings. Tsuna shrugged, which made Alice fuming as she pouted, Mao. You must be deliberately doing this. How annoying. Go cook your dish for me to judge who's better. Alice grabbed Tsuna's arm and attempted to pull him toward his station to cook. However, her pitiful strength was no match for Tsuna's, who barely budged an inch, twitching his lips in speechlessness. Humph. Of course, you were only fast. 200 servings? I doubled that amount and did more than 400. A condescending voice echoed as Tsuna and Alice turned to see Irina approaching them. Irina. Alice furrowed her eyebrows, subconsciously stepping in front of Tsuna as if protecting her territory. But Irina paid no mind, continuing with her words, such a disgrace. You think you're better than me just because you're fast? Being fast doesn't mean a thing in front of my cooking. She wore a smug expression, confident in her culinary prowess. Glancing at Alice before turning to Tsuna, Irina added, you should just follow her instructions and cook what you've served before to save some face. Tsuna remained silent as he just rolled his eyes at her. Irina's cheeks flushed red as she quickly looked away, attempting to explain herself. Humph. Of course, I'm not doing this just because I am curious about your cooking as well. I'm just such a magnanimous person that I offer you some guidance. Seeing this, Alice's eyes flashed as she swallowed her urge to start an argument with Irina and turned to Tsuna with a smile. See, even Irina agrees with me. Come on, Tsuna, go cook. Sigh. Listen, I'm not interested in cooking more since I've already worked up a sweat. It's time for a cold bath for me. So, my answer would always stay the same. Tsuna's response was laced with weariness. However, his attention shifted abruptly, drawing Alice and Irina's gaze. They followed his line of sight to a beautiful lady with a mole under her eye, her 11-year-old daughter tugging at her hand. Mom! The shawanmushi that I like is here. It seems like they ran out of food here. However, before she could lead her visibly disappointed daughter to other stations, Tsuna suddenly appeared before her. Ah, you are. I'm the one responsible for this station. I'll get your shawanmushi in a moment, just give me a second. With a swift movement, Tsuna disappeared behind the counter. A soft, gentle aroma started wafting from the station as he steamed another shawanmushi. In no time, he reappeared before her, holding the dish delicately. Here's my special shawanmushi just for you. Ah, sorry for troubling you, young man. The lady accepted the dish with a soft chuckle, her eyes lighting up as she beheld the beautiful bowl of shawanmushi in her hand. Meanwhile, both Alice and Irina were seething with frustration as they shouted at him, "Ito baka! You said you didn't want to cook anymore, so what's this?" "She's a mother I'd like to fry rice for," Tsuna explained with a stony expression. "Young man, you're too young for me. You can always invest early, my lady." "Phew, you're really good with words. Don't worry, I can be good at other things as well." "Oh my!" With a confident smile, Tsuna gently took her hand, eliciting a shy smile from her as she placed her hand over her cheeks and closed her eyes in shyness. She seemed to be enjoying this when suddenly, Alice's voice pierced through the air, "Ito baka! She's married already." Ah, the mother, who had shared her shawanmushi with her daughter, smiled at Alice, her eyes narrowing slightly. "I'm actually divorced." "Why do you need to explain, you old lady?" "Phew, who knows?" The mother's response was light-hearted, but it seemed to irk Alice even more. A strange tension seemed to spark between them. "Grr!" Alice growled like an animal who was cornered while the mother remained composed, a small smile playing on her lips. On the side. "Pervert!" Irina muttered, looking away with a flushed face, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Chapter 34, Chapter 32, Alumni Banquet Feast. To think that she'd go past 400 servings, truly amazing. A tall man with a female groove hairstyle spoke as he watched the screen where Tsuna stood casually in the middle, seemingly unfazed by the commotion around him as Alice and Irina kept bickering with each other. He was Hiromi Sina, the vice chef de cuisine of Totsuki Resort and Dojima's right-hand man. "Quite the feat," Dojima responded with a nod. They were currently monitoring the challenge from a dimly lit room with a screen displaying the main hall. "And there's Alice Nagiri," Sina remarked while watching Alice fuming on the screen. She managed to serve 380 portions this time. Both Nakiris are truly remarkable chefs. However, his attention soon shifted to Tsuna, who was calmly watching the scene unfold with an amused expression. "He's the quickest to complete the challenge, but..." Sena's voice trailed off, uncertain of how to articulate his thoughts about Tsuna. They had all witnessed Tsuna's unconventional approach, starting with his unexpected detour to the treadmill earlier that morning. "I guess we shouldn't have given him access to the treadmill this morning to see if it would change anything." "No, that wouldn't have made a difference," Dojima sighed, shaking his head in resignation. His gaze lingered on Tsuna as he added, "He probably would have done the same thing and gone for a run outside." After serving 200 portions, the students were free to leave, and Dojima was certain of it. As a morning person himself, he often encountered Tsuna out for a run when he went for his own morning jog. Even if they hadn't allowed Tsuna to use the treadmill, he would have found a way to fit in his morning run. "Genius can be quite unpredictable sometimes," Chef Chapelle remarked with his usual stern expression. "Well, I guess being the fastest still earns him a spot in the upcoming election," Sina commented with a wry smile, glancing at the professional judges who were carefully reviewing their notes. They formed the selection committee tasked with choosing the students who met the criteria to compete at the top level. As the organizers of the training camp directly under Totsuki Academy, they had no authority over these judges, who operated under the Elite 10 Council's jurisdiction. Dojima shook his head, his attention shifting to another student who had caught his eye. Oh? Seems like he's creative enough to complete the challenge. He observed Soma, who, after some initial struggles, managed to serve 200 customers with a bit of a showman's flair when he announced, Soma Yukihira has completed 200 servings. He's still unrefined, but he's interesting, Sina commented, eyeing the timer. Just in time, the 2-hour mark signaled the end of the breakfast challenge. For those of you who completed 200 servings, the next task is in 4 hours. You may rest until then. Dojima's announcement hit the students like a ton of bricks, leaving even those who barely made it feeling weak in the legs, almost ready to pass out. I forgot this was a training camp for a second. I guess we celebrated too early. Let's survive this. Murmurs of disbelief reverberated across the main hall as the reality sunk in. The training camp wasn't over yet, and they had to muster the strength to push through to the end. Meanwhile, those who failed could only linger in their stations, feeling utterly defeated and dejected. That day, despite the subsequent assignments being relatively easier compared to the grueling morning challenge, exhaustion weighed heavily on the students, making every task feel like an uphill battle. Expulsions came swiftly, the number nearly doubling compared to the previous days combined. Yet, amidst the chaos and fatigue, a resilient few gritted through, their determination kept them surviving. I can't feel my legs at all. Mom? Is that you? Someone's lost his mind here, help. In the hotel lobby, where the survivors were gathered, murmurs of disbelief filled the air as they awaited further instructions. Phew, seems like everyone's getting along well. Young lady, are they really getting along? Alice observed the struggling students with an amused smile, her eyes sparkling mischievously. Still, Ryo was oblivious to her sarcasm. Mao. How gullible. Of course, they're not. Her mood shifted abruptly, her playful demeanor replaced by irritation. Arms crossed, she huffed, you're so dumb, Ryo Baka. Even Ito-kun should know what I meant, right, hey. Alice turned to Tsuna, only to find herself speechless. 148, 149, done. Tsuna casually completed one-handed push UPS, eliciting eye rolls from those around him. That guy is definitely not human, Nichan, Isami commented, to which Takumi nodded in approval. As expected of my rival. Isami looked at Takumi, at a loss for words. It seemed being acknowledged by Tsuna as his rival turned his brother into a bit of a fool, prompting Isami to sigh. Why are you doing push UPS? Can't you see everyone's exhausted? You're clearly mocking them. Ito Baka. Alice's accusation rang out, her finger pointed accusingly at Tsuna. SHH. Stop screaming around. Tsuna hushed her, gently pressing a finger to her lips. Alice's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Still, seeing Dojima walk up to the stage, she looked away with a scoff. Humph, we'll continue this discussion later. A word before we get started. At this point, 352 students have dropped out, and around 628. Dojima's voice reverberated across the lobby as everyone looked at each other after hearing those numbers. Only about 200 students had dropped out in the last couple of days, but more than 100 were dropped out today because of the breakfast challenge and its after effects. Oh? They are truly strict about their seedlings, hey. Tsuna observed as Dojima began his inspiring speech, telling the students to use the experience to further their culinary journey. He smiled and continued, now, we will start the last program of this training camp. Everyone gulped and turned to look at the main hall door, which suddenly burst open. However. Welcome. They blinked in confusion as Dojima's voice continued, the last program is a small banquet to celebrate the completion of your training. Whoa! What in the world? They could see the alumni of Totsuki Culinary Academy, who had been supervising their training, waiting for them, and they exclaimed in surprise. A full course meal prepared by the alumni. Dojima ended his speech, and the students' faces lit up with happiness as the staff then guided them to enter. What timing, it just so happens that I'm hungry. Tsuna walked in and was guided to a circular table, where he sat down with Alice and Ryo by his side. Unexpectedly, Irina and Hisako seemed to be sitting at the same table as well, and tension suddenly ignited. Alice puffed her cheeks and stared annoyedly at Irina, who responded with a smug smile. There you are, Ito. I'm looking for you. A voice called out as Tsuna turned to see Shinomiya approaching, bringing something to the table. You prepared something for me. Yet. Shinomiya then placed it down and opened up the lid, revealing a bed of mixed salad greens, adding color and texture to the plate. This is a dish I made after some thought. Let me see what you think. I know you don't like vegetables, but I assure you this won't taste sad. He continued, showing a jar of white powder from his pocket, which made Tsuna smile as he nodded. Surrounding this base are slices of crisp bacon, golden and crunchy, and nestled in between are layers of delicate Savoy cabbage leaves, offering a touch of sophistication. It was certainly a perfect presentation. However, Alice and Ryo could only look at each other in silence upon seeing the jar of white powder that Shinomiya showed Tsuna, feeling their lips twitch with speechlessness. Chapter 35, Chapter 33, Going Back to Tokyo. Irina looked at Shinomiya, who adjusted his glasses with a puzzled expression. Then, she turned her gaze to Tsuna, noticing his calm demeanor amidst the confusion. She silently wondered, what's happening here? And why are they reacting so strangely? Glancing at Alice and Ryo, who appeared to be at a loss of words, Irina's frown deepened. There was undoubtedly something peculiar happening, and she couldn't shake off her curiosity. She didn't want to admit it, but she was dying to know what was happening. Beside her, Hisako also seemed to share Irina's sentiment, her brows furrowing in confusion. Well, let's try it out first, Irina murmured while turning her attention to the beautifully presented Joe farci before her. Beautiful. With a satisfied nod, she picked up her knife and delicately sliced through it, then lifted a portion with her fork. As she examined the dish, she thought, he should be able to make something that satisfies my palate. As everyone at the table began to savor the dish he made, Shinomiya couldn't help but slightly curl up his lips, anticipating their reactions. Then, in an instant, their eyes widened in astonishment as the flavors exploded on their palates. Savory, earthy, and luxurious notes danced across their taste buds, eliciting expressions of pure delight as they closed their eyes in bliss. Alice couldn't help but emit a contented sigh as she felt herself transported to a serene landscape, nestled at the foot of a majestic mountain. In her mind's eye, she wandered through lush greenery, guided by the tender and juicy flavors of the Sitsorai Jidori. The gentle breeze caressed her skin, adding to the comfort of the journey. However, there was a sudden kick to the taste, a surprising twist in the culinary journey. As Alice followed the guidance of the Jidori chicken, she found herself led to a helicopter waiting amidst the lush grass below the mountain. Her eyes widened in shock. A helicopter? That's right. Shinomiya's voice held a hint of conviction. His eyes gleamed with determination as he explained, it will show you a whole new world. Suddenly, everyone was soaring through the sky, greeted by a breathtaking vista that could only be witnessed from above. Mesmerized by the awe-inspiring scenery, they couldn't help but emit satisfied sounds of wonder. Each bite led to another, and before they knew it, their plates were empty as they snapped back to reality. Fascinating. Tsuna's voice carried genuine admiration as he offered a warm smile to Shinomiya. Impressed by Shinomiya's Joe farci, Tsuna rose from his seat, extending his hand for a handshake, that far surpassed your previous creations by far. I'm genuinely impressed. It's nothing remarkable. Shinomiya accepted the handshake, his grip firm, his expression serious. The room fell into a profound silence, even those unfamiliar with the backstory were struck dumb by the sudden camaraderie vibes before them. King of flavors changed me. No, it guides you. Shinomiya widened his eyes in shock before nodding as he adjusted his glasses. His expression turned stony as he heard Tsuna continue, don't worry, I've got you. Comrade. I see, I appreciate that. Comrade. Both of their faces hardened as they looked at each other with understanding in their eyes, nodding in agreement. They might not know each other closely, but as a cook, they respected each other. What in the world? Alice couldn't help but cringe at their exchange, her hand covering her face in second-hand embarrassment. Even Ryo couldn't hide a slight blush creeping up his neck, before looking away. Thankfully, the atmosphere was broken by the rest of the alumni coming over to their table, eager to see Tsuna taste their food. Irina couldn't help but shoot him a sidelong glance, feeling as if he held the title of God's tongue instead of her. The next day, after enjoying what seemed to be the best banquet most students had ever been to, they began pulling their luggage out of the hotel to the bus. Oh? Shinomiya-senpai, are you heading back to France? As he was about to head out, Tsuna encountered Shinomiya in the lobby. Shinomiya nodded as he glanced at Tsuna's backpack, seemingly all he brought to the training camp. Yeah, I figured it's about time I try to earn 3 stars for my restaurant, Shino. Oh, Tsuna. I see. I don't know much about how hard it is, but it should be pretty easy for you, Tsuna shrugged, waving his hand at Soma and Megami, who approached them. Well, it's great to hear that. I'm pretty confident in myself as well. Shinomiya nodded as Soma and Megami greeted him. Ah, Shinomiya-senpai, good morning. He nodded at them before turning back to Tsuna. Let me know if you come over to France, I'll show you around if you do. Got it, have a safe flight. Tsuna nodded as Shinomiya slowly made his way out. Shinomiya glanced at his suitcase, feeling like he could see through the jar of white powder he put in there, muttering, I'll show the world the brand new Kojiro Shinomiya. He was looking forward to the new culinary journey that awaited him, his expression hardening into a stony one. You seem to get along with Shinomiya-senpai, Tsuna-kun. Megami spoke in amazement as she looked at Shinomiya's departing figure. Soma also nodded in agreement as he chuckled, that's actually unexpected, I thought you both would be at each other's throats. It's nothing impressive, we just sort of walk the same path. Tsuna calmly remarked with a serious expression. He then looked at his wristwatch and bid his farewell, anyway, I'm about to head out as well, guys. Take care. You're going now? But wasn't the bus scheduled to depart in an hour? Megami blinked in confusion. However, Tsuna just chuckled as he spoke, I'll go for a run from here. He had taken the bus to get to the resort because he didn't know the way, but now that he was familiar with it, Tsuna decided to use the opportunity to push himself to a new limit. But that's like an hour and a half even with a bus. Soma was slightly speechless, but Tsuna didn't seem to care as he walked away, leaving them looking at him flabbergasted. I guess Tsuna-kun is just being Tsuna-kun. Yeah, I guess. Outside, Tsuna's voice echoed, who's gonna carry the boats? With that, Tsuna embarked on his journey, running down the hill toward his restaurant back in Tokyo with his backpack bouncing with each step, his clothes gradually becoming soaked with sweat as the hours passed. Meanwhile, somewhere in Tokyo. Growling. A middle-aged man with long, swept-back brown hair felt his stomach growling, urging him to fill it up with something. He had a small suitcase slung effortlessly over his shoulder as he muttered, I guess I need to eat somewhere before going to the dormitory. Eat those golden fried rice? Ah, it's closed. He muttered as he found a small restaurant similar to the one he owned, which made him think of his son currently studying at Totsuki. He chuckled, Soma must be having quite the adventure at Totsuki. He was Saba Yukihira. You don't know me, son. Hey! A loud shout was heard as he turned to see a teenager around his kid's age running toward the restaurant, his body clearly drenched in sweat. Blinking, he watched as the teenager opened up the restaurant and walked in. His eyes lit up as he approached and asked, Wait a minute. Kiddo, are you going to open the restaurant anytime soon? Hey! Tsuna's brow furrowed slightly as he studied the man before him, a sense of déjà vu tickling the corners of his mind. With a nod, he responded, Yeah, you wanna grab a seat? Chapter 36, Chapter 34, Saba Yukihira. After opening the restaurant for Saba, Tsuna took a look at the ingredients. He noticed all the ingredients were available. While Saba was sitting down, Tsuna turned on the rice cooker, using a lower amount of water to ensure it was dry enough to fry. You don't even have the rice ready. Saba called him out, scratching his head awkwardly. Tsuna noticed Saba seemed to be considering going out to another restaurant as he thought of a way to persuade the guy to stay so he could earn money. Then, something caught his eye, and an idea sparked in his mind. He nodded, Yeah, I just came back from a week-long training camp. So, I wasn't able to prepare the rice beforehand. Anyway, old man, give me some time to clean up. Tsuna grabbed a jar of crackers and placed it on the table where the middle-aged man sat. Here, you can have them for free. I made them myself. Training camp. Saba's interest was piqued at Tsuna's mention of a training camp. He knew Soma should also be attending one this week. He looked at Tsuna, suddenly intrigued. Oh? Is he also from Totsuki? Crackers, hey? I suppose they could delay my hunger a bit, Saba murmured as he opened the lid and took out a cracker, biting into it. Crunch! Saba widened his eyes at the delightfully crispy crackers, the satisfying crunch echoing with each bite. The umami flavor. Message. Saba examined the cracker with a hint of surprise. It was unusual to find crackers seasoned with message. However, despite its unusual flavoring, it was undeniably one of the best crackers he had ever tasted. Saba smiled appreciatively, now. You've piqued my interest, young man. I'm looking forward to trying your fried rice. After a while. Oh ho ho. It's open. Finally, it's been 5 days. 5 days. Oh ho ho ho, I'm so happy. Saba turned to look at the entrance after hearing the peculiar laughter and excited remarks, only to open his mouth wide in shock as he saw a large yellow octopus walking in with a wide smirk on its face. He mumbled, "What in the world?" Another man in a suit walked in and saw this. "That's why I told you to bring your mask," he sighed as the yellow octopus chuckled. "Oh ho ho, come on, Karasuma, you can get him to sign the NDA." However, to their surprise, Saba approached with his eyes sparkling in curiosity while his hands reached out to touch the unusual creature before him. "Oh, you don't seem to be afraid of me." Koro-sensei watched with intrigue as Saba didn't seem to fear him, his tentacles twitching slightly in response to Saba's touch. "You?" "Yes." Koro-sensei's response was met with an eager grin from Saba, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "Can I get a piece of your tentacles?" "Hey? What did you say?" Both Koro-sensei and Karasuma couldn't believe their ears as they looked at Saba in confusion. "This is my new experiment with octopus meat." Saba reached into his pocket and produced a jar filled with octopus tentacles coated in a mysterious darkened liquid. With a sigh, he explained, "But the taste just doesn't mix well with the tentacles, so I wonder if yours would. Anyway, do you want to try and tell me what you think?" "That's quite a disturbing request. Besides, it would essentially be cannibalism, no?" Karasuma furrowed his eyebrows as he crossed his arms with a thoughtful expression. "That's so rude of you. I was also once human and ate octopus." The words seemed to strike a nerve with Koro-sensei, his body flushing red with indignation along with his tentacles that were waving agitatedly. His expression grew increasingly heated. "Kakik, you're so interesting." Saba's chuckle echoed through the air, a mischievous glint in his eyes as he eyed Koro-sensei. A sudden shiver coursed through Koro-sensei's body as he saw Saba lick his lips. However, "Here, try it." Before Koro-sensei could react, Saba extended a chopstick, offering a piece of his experimental dish. Koro-sensei peered at the peculiar-looking tentacles on the chopstick. "Ah, can I?" Yet. Come on, let me know what you think." "Unfortunately." Blerg. The moment the tentacles touched his tongue, Koro-sensei's whole body convulsed and immediately turned purple. He let out an incomprehensible string of gibberish as he writhed on the ground, trying to rid himself of the taste. "Seems like he doesn't like it," Saba muttered, disappointment evident in his tone as he watched Koro-sensei's reaction. "What the hell did you just feed him?" Karasuma looked at Saba in shock, eyeing him with a new level of wariness as his hand instinctively reached out for his weapon. "Y'all need to give me an explanation for this." A voice was heard as everyone turned to Tsuna, who walked down the stairs, his expression speechless as he observed Koro-sensei rolling on the ground, screaming gibberish while his body changed color like a chameleon. "Kakik, it's nothing. He just got a taste of my experimental dish, and let me tell you." Saba's tone was playful, almost gleeful, as he grinned widely, "It tastes terrible." Tsuna scratched his head at this, now understanding why this middle-aged man seemed so familiar to him as he spoke, like father, like son. "Hey! You must be Soma's dad." "Oh, you know Soma?" "Yeah, I transferred with him to Totsuki a while ago, so we know each other." He sighed, deciding to ignore the rolling octopus and get to his station since the rice seemed ready by now. As Tsuna turned the stove on and began cooking, Saba sat back in his seat, watching with interest. However, "Hey!" He also glanced around before his eyes widened as he saw the price. He exclaimed, "Wait a second, your fried rice costs 5,000 yen? That's like $30. Are you sure you wrote the price correctly?" "Nope, it's the correct price," Tsuna replied, keeping his focus on the wok in his hand as he started to add all the ingredients, spreading their aroma throughout the restaurant. "Young man, why don't you give me a bit of a discount? You know my son, don't you?" "Even if Soma were here, he'd have to pay the same price," Tsuna responded firmly. Saba scratched his forehead as he continued to negotiate. "Come on, just this once. You know money can't buy you happiness, right? Giving me a discount will do." "I do agree money can't buy you happiness," Tsuna nodded as his hand swiftly moved, coating the rice with the wok hay. He then turned to look at Saba with a serious expression and spoke, "But a lot of money can." Saba fell into silence, at a loss for words. "Ha ha ha, old man, you won't stand a chance arguing with him." Koro-sensei chuckled, seeming to have recovered from his earlier ordeal thanks to the aroma. He sat down in a corner, apparently avoiding Saba, while Karasuma lightly smiled, seemingly in agreement. "I guess, yeah," Saba scratched his head, conceding defeat. Tsuna, appearing to have finished cooking, then brought the plate of fried rice over to Saba's table. He confidently spoke, "Go ahead, give it a try, and let me know if you want to order more." "As if I would." Saba grumbled, feeling like he'd been duped. "Hey." However, the words got stuck in his throat as he saw the fried rice glisten in the light, each grain shimmering with a golden hue that hinted at the delicious flavors within. Chapter 37, Chapter 35, A New Mission. After tasting Tsuna's fried rice, Saba proceeded to eat his own words and ordered a few more servings, despite the cost. "Well, seems like Soma's got quite the challenge ahead of him," Saba muttered, casting a serious glance back at the small restaurant as he left. "Whatever." Shrugging his shoulders, he continued toward the nearest bus stop, intending to visit the Polar Star dormitory. Murmuring to himself with a smile, he pondered, "Let's see just how much Soma has grown. How unfortunate." Koro-sensei spoke in pity while looking at the empty plate before him. Stacks of other empty plates lined his side of the table, evidence of the 10 servings he had ordered that day. "I could only eat 1 serving a day, considering its price." Karasuma glanced at his own empty plates, feeling a pang of jealousy towards Koro-sensei. This guy threatened the government to give him more salary, what a psycho. If only I could do the same. The thought crossed his mind momentarily before he shook his head, acknowledging it was beyond his capability. "Ito-kun, do you not have any plans to add a new menu?" "New menu?" "Yeah, if you had another menu, wouldn't you make more money since I'd order all of them?" Koro-sensei suggested with a grin. Tsuna pondered for a moment, mulling over the idea. "I guess you're right. I'll think about it," he conceded, his finger tapping against his chin in contemplation. Koro-sensei's tentacles waved happily at Tsuna's response. With their conversation concluded, both Koro-sensei and Karasuma bid farewell and left the restaurant. Tsuna closed up shop, his mind still preoccupied with thoughts of which cuisine to add to the menu. He was skilled in many Japanese cuisines but remained uncertain about the best choice. "Let's think about this tomorrow," Tsuna decided, feeling the weight of exhaustion from his long run back from Totsuki Resort. The next day, the academy bustled with activity as students swarmed the main building at the center. "Let's go, they're announcing it today." "Ah, I messed up a lot in the training camp, will I still be chosen?" Hurry up, hurry up." Today marked the announcement for those who would be selected to participate in the 43rd annual Tsuki Autumn election. This election would determine the class standing of the current generation of first-year students through a cooking tournament. More importantly, winning the election could significantly boost a student's chances of eventually joining Tsuki's prestigious Elite 10 Council. "Sounds like fun," Tsuna remarked as he leaned against the wall, observing the commotion with interest. Rushed steps echoed as students hurried to stand before a large announcement panel covered in cloth in front of the building. "Oh! They're opening it." The event organizers and committee members from the Elite 10 Council unveiled it, revealing a list of names. "Shit, did you see your name?" "No, damn it, I knew it." Some students expressed frustration and sadness upon not finding their names on the list, while others were relieved to see theirs. "Have you seen your name, Tsuna?" a voice called from behind. "Tsuna." Tsuna turned to see Alice walking with her hand behind her back. She leaned toward him, smiling gracefully with her eyes closed. "Fufu, I think we're close enough to call each other by our first name by now, right? I've been calling you Alice anyway, so it doesn't matter whether you call me Tsuna or Ito." "Of course, it matters. Do you know what it means for me to call you by your first name?" Alice leaned closer, her cheeks seeming flushed red with shyness. "However." "Ah, I found my name." An emotionless voice interrupted, making Alice's veins bulge in annoyance as she sharply turned to Ryo and shouted, "Mao! Ryo! You ruined the moment." "Ah, did I?" Ryo scratched his cheek in confusion, unsure of what he had done wrong as Alice berated him. Tsuna watched Alice fuming and scolding Ryo as he muttered, "Silly girl." "Tsuna, I saw your name there. Soma arrived with the rest of the Polar Star dormitory members, giving Tsuna a thumbs up. Yeah, I don't know much about what the election is all about, but I guess it sounds like fun, don't you think? Right. Tsuna thought it was exactly what someone like Soma would say. I'm looking forward to competing against you, my rival. Takumi's proud declaration rang out across the field, drawing curious glances from the other students as Shinomiya whispered, Nichan, you're too loud. Ahem. He coughed in embarrassment. However, a tall figure with striking purple hair strode purposefully towards Tsuna. With a fierce slap against the wall, she pinned him in place, her intense gaze fixed upon him. Gasps of surprise filled the air as everyone watched in astonishment as Tsuna found himself kabedoned by a random female student. You are. Tsuna looked into her purple eyes before unconsciously lowering his gaze to something that touched his chest. He nodded in appreciation before looking up again, realizing that their faces were dangerously close, almost on the verge of kissing. Miyoko Hojo, she introduced herself before continuing, Tsunayoshi Ito, I like a strong man like you. She reached out and placed her hand on Tsuna's cheek, leaving him slightly speechless. He gently pushed her hand away and sighed, I can sue you for sexual harassment, you know. I don't care about that. Now, why don't we get married? Our bloodline would surely be strong, don't you think? Awawa. Megami's face flushed red as she brought her fingertips together, watching the scene unfold like a scene straight out of a movie. A good materials. Yoshino and Sakaki exchanged a knowing glance before retrieving a notebook, their smiles hinting at some secret plan. Mao. What the hell are you doing? Alice intervened, her face flushed with a mixture of frustration and embarrassment as she separated them, glaring at Hojo like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. Hojo raised an eyebrow at Alice before turning back to Tsuna, I don't mind if you have multiple spouses, don't worry. You crazy bitch. Alice's retort was sharp, her cheeks puffed in annoyance as she launched into a tirade against Hojo. She was fuming. I've never felt so jealous in my life. Yeah, I think I'm doomed to be single forever. I know you're being honest, but you can't be too honest. The guys from the Polar Star dormitory observed the scene with deadpan expressions, while Takumi nodded in satisfaction, muttering, as expected of my rival. Meanwhile, both Soma and Ryo tilted their heads in confusion at the scene, blinking in bewilderment. Both of you are not my type. If it's your mom, then sure, but... Tsuna silently thought to himself as he straightened up, his eyes widening. He noticed the transparent screen suddenly appear in front of him. Unconsciously, he muttered, I guess this answered what I should add to the menu. Alright, guys, seems like I gotta leave. He bid his farewell and began to run back home. Amidst a heated argument between Alice and Hojo, both turned their annoyed faces toward Tsuna's retreating figure, shouting in unison, Don't go anywhere. We have yet to settle this, you idiot. But Tsuna paid them no mind. His eyes sparkled with excitement as he glanced at the transparent screen before him. Mission, learn the way of ramen from Ichiraku ramen shop and create a menu for your own restaurant. Reward, expert level earthbending and round trip ticket of Naruto world. Description, gain expert level proficiency in earthbending from the Avatar universe without any issues of different origins and a round trip pass in which you can stay in the world to do whatever you want without any restrictions in the form of a particular mission. Interesting. Will I finally be able to taste the legendary ramen? His heart beat with excitement as he looked forward to accepting the mission and immediately transported over to the Naruto world. Chapter 38, Chapter 36, Naruto Uzumaki. Whoa! So this is what Konoha looks like, hey! Tsuna exclaimed as he finally reached the front gate of the Hidden Leaf Village. Right after accepting the mission, he was transported to a nearby forest and had to walk there on his own. The gate itself was quite imposing yet welcoming. It seemed to be made from sturdy wood and reinforced with metal, with a long wall extending from the gate surrounding the entire village. From a distance, he could also see the carved faces of the former Hokage. Excuse me, could you get out of the way? Oh, right, my bad. Tsuna blinked and quickly stepped aside, realizing he was obstructing the flow of people entering the village. He looked at the long lines and noticed that Konoha seemed to be quite a popular destination for merchants. Many people were transporting goods with carriages reminiscent of those seen in historical movies. Tsuna smiled, feeling like he had been transported back in time. He muttered, this feels like fiction. He was now wearing a loose white kimono and walking around barefoot, feeling a stronger connection to the earth this way. Let's get in first. Tsuna muttered to himself before joining the line. As he finally arrived at the security post, he saw two ninjas wearing chunin vests. One had his hair combed down and covered his right eye, while the other had a bandage running across his nose. "Hello there," the ninja with the bandage said. "My name is Katetsu Hagane, and this is my partner, Izumo Kamizuki. I've never seen you around. Is this your first time in Konoha?" "Yes, is it always this busy in Konoha?" Tsuna asked, curious about the constant flow of people coming in and out. Izumo shook his head as he answered, "No, not really. We usually have fewer people coming over, but since there is an ongoing chunin exam in our village, we have a flood of people coming over to watch." Tsuna's eyes lit up as he immediately guessed which arc he was in as he mumbled, "Chunin exam, hey. You're not coming to watch the exam?" "Nope." "Ah, I see. Anyway, we're going to need to know who you are, where you are from, and why you came to Konoha. Would you mind introducing yourself in that sequence?" Izumo asked as they had to list everyone who went in and out of the village, their affiliation and their purposes. Tsuna nodded and introduced himself, "My name is Tsunayoshi Ito. I come from a small village in the south, and I'm on a journey to refine my skills as a cook." Of course, he was talking nonsense. But Tsuna kept a straight face without a blink as he lied through his teeth. "Ah, a chef, hey? I see. What brings you to our village this time?" "Yes, I'm actually here to try the ramen from Ichiraku ramen shop since I heard that it's a really good ramen." Tsuna explained with a friendly smile, eliciting nods of recognition from both of them. With their guard lowered, they treated him as a mere civilian. "Ah, you've come to the right place. Ichiraku ramen is undoubtedly the best spot in our village. Since this is your first time here, you might need some directions." Izumo mused, rubbing his chin in thought. "Let me tell you where you need to go, from the gate, just head straight." He then provided Tsuna with the necessary directions to reach the ramen shop. "Ah, I see. Thank you, that'd be helpful." Tsuna replied gratefully before he finally made his first step into the village. Now, then. He looked at the vibrant, bustling atmosphere. The main street is alive with people going about their day, shopkeepers setting up their stalls, kids running around, and ninjas of all ranks moving swiftly. Such a lively village. Tsuna chuckled as he went on. However, instead of going where Izumo had told him to, Tsuna took a different route. He planned to see the whole village on his own to familiarize himself with it and even memorize it. It was his habit from when he was active as an assassin. As he kept going his own way, memorizing all the buildings and the map, he came across Konoha Cemetery. It was tucked away from the busy streets, a quiet place with rows of gravestones standing silently as he observed ninjas or even civilians paying their respects. He also visited the training grounds, slightly on the outskirts of the village, where he saw many ninjas training with their friends, teachers, or lovers. Tsuna didn't forget to see the Ninja Academy for himself and the Hokage building. "I guess it's time to go eat the ramen." He turned around and walked through the narrow street, which connected to the main street close to the gate. However, that pervy sage, just where did he go? Whoa! A kid, around 12 with striking blonde hair and fully orange attire, bumped into him, falling on his butt. It was Naruto. Oh! Tsuna raised his eyebrows in surprise since it was completely unexpected. Naruto was currently looking for Jiraiya, as the old man had disappeared, leaving him hanging after knocking Ebisu out, who was supposed to teach him some stuff. Realizing that he bumped into a stranger, Naruto seemed flustered as he immediately stood up and bowed. "Ah, my apologies. I didn't see you there." "That's fine." That's fine? You're not angry?" Naruto seemed surprised to see Tsuna responding casually as if it was no big deal. Usually, people would get angry at him since he was quite well known to be a troublemaker around here and someone most people would avoid or even hate, considering he was a Jinchuriki. Tsuna just chuckled as he rustled the kid's hair, nodding, "Now, that's funny." "Ah." Naruto scratched his head as he watched Tsuna walk away, then ran after him, shouting, "Nichan, where are you going?" He didn't know why, but he quite liked how Tsuna treated him with no prejudice, and he wanted to get to know him. "I'm going to eat ramen, why do you ask?" "Oh. Ramen. I know a good place. Come, follow me." Naruto's eyes lit up as he grinned widely before introducing himself. "Oh, by the way, my name is Naruto Uzumaki. My dream is to be a Hokage. Hokage, hey? That's a lofty dream. Hehe, I know, but I believe I could do it. Looking at the excited Naruto just made Tsuna shake his head as he followed after the kid, knowing where he would take him. However, as they walked side by side, Tsuna's eyes flashed, lightly glancing around without making it obvious as he muttered, seems like there are some people following me. Or should I say, following him. He turned to Naruto, who was completely oblivious to all of this, as the kid just comfortably put his hand behind his head in a laid-back manner. Anyway, I haven't seen you around here. Are you not from Konoha? Tsuna nodded, yeah, I travel from one village to another. Oh. That's so dope. Both of them continued to talk with each other, mostly Naruto speaking, since he felt excited that Tsuna didn't seem to mind his presence, unlike most other civilians. Before they realized. Oh. We've finally arrived. Naruto led the way, his excitement palpable as he dashed into the shop, calling out, Hey, old man Totsuki, I bring a new customer here. Tsuna closed his eyes and sent out a ripple of energy beneath his feet. They really are following Naruto, hey. When he did, he could sense the faint presence of hidden ninja lurking nearby, their forms appearing like faint holographic figures in his mind. Who were they? Were they Anbu? He thought it was likely the case considering the way they were being secretive. Whatever, let's just focus on my main goal first. But then he decided to push away his suspicion first before turning to the small shop in front of him. Opening his eyes, he muttered, Ichiraku ramen shop, hey? I'm looking forward to trying out your ramen. Chapter 39, Chapter 37, Ichiraku Ramen Shop. Welcome to Ichiraku Ramen Shop. A welcoming voice greeted Tsuna as he entered. It was none other than the legendary character from Naruto, Totsuki, accompanied by his daughter, Hayama, who smiled warmly at him. Old man Totsuki, he's the Nichin I told you about. Naruto giggled as he settled into a chair. He then reached into his frog pouch, rummaging for money. Where's my money? Naruto muttered, furrowing his eyebrows as he rummaged through his frog pouch. He could feel various items, but none of them seemed to be money since he also stored all sorts of small things in his pouch. That's all right, Naruto. Since you made it to the finals, I'll treat you to some good ramen, Totsuki said with a fond smile, seeing Naruto's face light up with excitement. Really? Then, sure. Thank you, old man. Tsuna nodded at Totsuki in respect, observing the scene before speaking, you must be Totsuki-san, right? Yes, dear customer. What would you like to order? Well, I do want to try out your ramen, but I don't have any money, Tsuna explained, causing Totsuki and Hayama to blink in confusion. Undeterred, Tsuna took out a box and placed it on the table, opening it to reveal a beautiful knife. Such a beautiful knife! It was obvious that the knife was crafted by an artisan as it caught both Totsuki and Hayama's eyes, leaving them in amazement. My name is Tsuna. I'm a cook just like you. I travel the world to better myself, Tsuna began his scripted explanation before revealing his true intention. So, how about I pay you guys with the knife? Ah? That looks like an expensive knife. Hayama remarked, eyeing the knife on the table. Of course it's expensive, it's a gift from Totsuki Resort. Tsuna silently thought. Technically it was indeed a gift. He did accidentally brought it home with him after finishing the training camp. But, after calling the principal, that old man simply gave it to him. Totsuki scratched his head and gave a wry smile as he responded, young man, that knife would be a bit too valuable for us to exchange it for a ramen. How about this, since you were brought here by Naruto, I'll just treat you to a free ramen for today and celebrate his success in reaching the final stage together. Whoa! I agree with. Ouch! Naruto raised his hand excitedly, but Tsuna lightly smacked him on the head and chided him, it's not your restaurant, you brat. Ah, you're right. Hehe. Naruto looked at Totsuki apologetically and sheepishly scratched his nose. You're truly too kind. Haha, come on. I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. Tsuna smiled at this as Totsuki and Hayama looked at each other before smiling. Totsuki then began to work with Hayama's help. His hand was swift as he immediately cooked the noodles before placing them in the bowls that Hayama had prepared. He then poured the hot broth over the noodles. Slices of chashu pork, half of a soft-boiled egg, sliced green onions, nori sheets, menma, spinach leaves or bok choy, and fish cake were skillfully added by Hayama. Toka then sprinkled them with toasted sesame seeds for an extra layer of flavor. There you go. He placed the bowls of ramen right in front of Tsuna and Naruto, who looked at the simple yet beautiful bowls of ramen in front of them in delight. Whoa! It smells delicious as always. Indeed, Tsuna muttered as he took a spoon and tried the broth. He then widened his eyes. The broth was rich and savory, full of deep flavors from the pork bones, soy sauce, and a hint of sweetness from mirin. However, this didn't end there, as Tsuna was assaulted with a wave of nostalgia just from a single sip of the broth. His childhood memories resurfaced as he silently thought, no, it's not mine. These are the memories that were deeply rooted within this body of mine. Tsuna's previous life was filled with coldness he could vividly recall, and he knew he had never felt such warmth before. Seems like your memories are still alive within me, hey. It was the former Tsuna's memories. Oh, you like it? Toki exclaimed with a wide smile on his face, seeing Tsuna's reaction. Tsuna nodded at him before he took his chopsticks and tasted the noodles along with the broth. He took a deep breath as the flavor exploded within his palate, closing his eyes in bliss. The noodles were perfectly cooked, with a satisfying chew that paired perfectly with the rich broth. Such simplicity! It reminded him of what he had seen in his memories. It was like eating a meal prepared with love and care. The soft-boiled egg, with its creamy yolk, added an extra layer of comfort, much like the little treats his deceased mother in his memories would include to make meals special. The fresh spinach, crisp green onions, and bits of seaweed brought a fresh, wholesome taste, just like the vegetables in a home-cooked meal. I think I'm starting to understand why this is such great ramen. Tsuna muttered as he looked at the empty bowl with a complicated expression. The flavors lingered, giving him a warm and satisfied feeling. This ramen brought back a warmth he was unfamiliar yet familiar with in his mind. It comforted him, making him feel relaxed, and it felt like home. He let out a deep sigh as he looked at Toki, who nodded at him, seemingly noticing his complicated expression. See, I told you. Naruto happily giggled, seeing Tsuna's reaction, as he proudly declared, this place has the best ramen in the world. You say it as if you are the one making it. Tsuna shook his head, while Naruto just shyly chuckled. However, he turned to Toki and spoke, though I gotta agree. He had eaten a lot of ramen that was fabled to be the best in his previous life, but the ramen Toki had made brought him a new kind of feeling he had never experienced before, and he smiled. That smile somehow surprised Toki as he widened his eyes while Ayam looked at Tsuna's smile with a blush on her face. It's truly the best ramen I've ever had. For the first time in his life, Tsuna genuinely smiled without faking it. Meanwhile, in a dark corner of Konoha, tucked away in a maze of dimly lit hallways, a lone individual sat in a windowless room. With messy black hair and a scar cutting across his chin, he pondered deeply, his voice echoing in the chamber. A civilian made contact with that boy. Yes, Danzo-sama, replied a figure clad in dark attire with his features concealed behind a sleek, expressionless mask. That's quite unlikely. Is he from around here? No ordinary civilian would dare to be close to Naruto, considering the rumors spreading about him being the incarnation of the Kyuubi, which were quite incorrect yet almost correct. No, according to the report from the front gate, he's a chef from a small village in the south. Then he's just being ignorant. There is no need to report such an insignificant thing to me. Danzo frowned as he coldly looked at the root member, who bowed in apology as he explained, that's what we originally thought, but we spotted him in several locations around the village, which seems suspicious. Give me the details. Danzo listened to the explanation and muttered, familiarizing yourself with a new environment is quite a common trait for a spy. Place someone on him, report anything suspicious to me. Understood. The root agent acknowledged the order and swiftly vanished from Danzo's presence. Alone in his chamber, Danzo's gaze fell upon the report detailing the Chunin exam as he muttered to himself, what game are you playing, Orochimaru? They had certain agreement but this was not part of it at all. Chapter 40, Chapter 38, Power of Youth. That day, after finishing his bowl of ramen, Naruto immediately left, realizing he still had to find Jiraiya and hold him accountable for what he had done to Ebisu. Tsuna then told Toka he wanted to work for him for free, saying he wished to learn how to make good ramen from the legend himself. This made Toka look at Tsuna in a new light before allowing him to do so, even giving him lodging in their place since they had a spare room unused. A few days had passed, and Tsuna's daily routine had changed to resemble that of an intern at Ichiraku Ramen. Every night, He helped prepare the broth for the next day, as it took 8 hours to become rich in flavor. He also had to wake up early to prepare the shashu pork, which took 2 hours to be perfect. "Are you going out for a run again?" Toku's voice echoed from the small ramen shop as Tsuna stepped outside, smiling. "Yeah, I'll be back in a while." "All right." With that, Tsuna headed to the training ground to start his morning routine. At this early hour, the training ground was mostly empty. By the end of his session, ninjas from all levels would start to arrive for their training. They're still watching me, hey." Tsuna murmured as he closed his eyes, sensing a figure quietly observing him from a distance. The observer was clearly well trained, as Tsuna could barely detect their presence. He opened his eyes, which gleamed with a cold light, and chuckled. "Seems like I attracted unnecessary attention from a tricky guy." Tsuna didn't know who was watching him. Is it Enbu, or? Tsuna's eyes flickered with doubts. He had initially thought they were following Naruto and would leave once Naruto did. But even after Naruto left, one of them stayed, quietly observing him. "I guess I can only train my metal bending today," Tsuna muttered to himself. If he didn't have earthbending and the ability to sense the figure watching him from afar, he might have exposed his bending abilities by training openly. He shook his head in pity as he secretly took out a ball of metal, covering it with both hands. Phew! Tsuna took a deep breath as he adopted a Tai Chi stance, holding the metal ball in his hand. As he began moving, his breath synchronized with his movements. He slowly channeled a ripple of energy through the ball, then opened his hand while stepping forward. The ball of metal was slowly transforming into a pair of chopsticks that he now held in both hands, completely hidden from whoever was watching him. He moved slowly and steadily. Unlike earth, which was more malleable, metal required more stamina and concentration to bend. Tsuna's movements were deliberate and precise. His breath followed his movements, maintaining a fluidity as he shifted his weight structurally. Beads of sweat began to form on his forehead as he continued. "What the hell is that guy doing?" The root member could only watch with a speechless expression beneath his mask. They were trained to be emotionless, but even he had his limits after seeing such a bizarre spectacle. He had been wondering why Tsuna was doing that for hours as he mumbled, "And he's sweating doing that? I just don't understand." The root member didn't realize Tsuna was changing the metal in his hand repeatedly with each motion, so to him, Tsuna's actions seemed pointless and absurd. Seeing Tsuna finally finish after a few hours, the root member unconsciously sighed, "Finally." "Hey? Never mind." However, midway through his sentence, the root member swallowed hard as he saw someone approaching Tsuna. "What a youthful way to start the day, Tsuna-kun." "Oh, Guy-san. You're early as usual." Tsuna opened his eyes and smiled at the tall man with thick eyebrows and a bowl haircut. He sweated a lot, and seeing his trembling hand, Guy silently observed Tsuna's drenched figure, nodding in respect as he felt like he was seeing his younger self, training to his limit every day. He couldn't help but tear up slightly at the sight, giving Tsuna a thumbs up. "You're a lot earlier than I am. To think that I've met someone with such spirit. Might Guy, respect that." Guy gave him the brightest smile Tsuna had ever seen, accompanied by a thumbs up that seemed to shine along with that smile. "You're as energetic as always." Tsuna felt a slight twitch to his lips in speechlessness. They had met a few days ago when Tsuna was running around the village. Guy had suddenly appeared beside him, remarking that he had never met anyone else who ran like he and his disciple, Lee. Unfortunately, Lee was hospitalized, which left Guy feeling a bit lonely. Seeing Tsuna pushing through his exhaustion, Guy's eyes had lit up at the sight, and they had been getting along quite well since then as they became a running buddy. "Here's what I promised," Guy spoke as he pulled out 2 heavy-looking bands from his ninja bag. "This is ankle weight, and this is for your upper body." "Oh, right, you mentioned those before." Tsuna's eyes lit up at the sight of the sturdy straps and buckles. Guy had promised Tsuna to give it as a way to help him train after seeing how Tsuna had always been determined to push his limits every day. "Haha, these were what I had when I was a kid, so you can't adjust the weight like you can with the current weights in the market. I call them the weight of guts for the ankles and the weight of determination for the upper body." "Thanks, Guy-san. Let's give them a try," Tsuna replied eagerly. Immediately, Guy's eyes shone at this as he exclaimed, "Such a youthful spirit. I like that." With Guy's help, Tsuna fastened the weights in place. However, as the heaviness washed over him, Tsuna widened his eyes, almost falling forward as he struggled to maintain his balance. "Ugh! He gritted his teeth and forced himself to regain his footing. Still, he couldn't help but ask, "What the hell? How heavy is this?" It's about 100 kilograms in total. You wore these when you were a kid? Ha ha ha, yes, I used them when I was in the academy. Guy spoke with a nostalgic tone in his voice, as if recalling fond memories from his academy days. Tsuna looked at him with a bit of shock in his heart. Damn, seems like I've been overestimating my strength too much. Still, that didn't falter his determination to get stronger, since he wanted to go on more adventures, to explore new worlds without the fear of dying. Well, I haven't even reached my peak from my previous life yet anyway, he muttered, his eyes flaring with determination. Guy sensed the youthful energy emanating from Tsuna as he smirked. Let's do this, friend. Then, Tsuna continued his morning routine, which was to run for the next 2 hours alongside Guy. Each step felt like an eternity with the weights dragging him down, and he felt like he could pass out at any second. Tsuna, we can take a. Guy also noticed this, about to ask him to stop. However, a crazed glint seemed to appear in Tsuna's eyes as he shouted, "You don't know me, son." Guy seemed touched at the sight, placing his hand over his mouth as tears streamed down his eyes. He muttered, "Sorry for doubting your youthful spirit, Tsuna." The root member who was watching from a far distance also couldn't hold his tears running down his eyes. But, Danzo-sama, I want to go home. For a different reason, though.
Thanks for listening.